And welcome back to EWTN's continuing live coverage of the Knights of Columbus, the 134th Supreme Convention, coming to you live from Toronto, Canada. And I'm Doug Keck, looking forward ahead to the bottom of the hour when we have the business session opening up just in a few minutes. And really the keynote address during that is the address of the Supreme Knight, and that's when Carl Anderson will really lay out what's been happening and a pathway into the future, basically, for the Knights of Columbus. So we've got that coming up momentarily. Don't forget that tonight we also will have the State's Dinner, which is always very, very popular. And now we want to take you to an interview we did with the Archbishop for the Military Services for the USA earlier today. And joining us here is the Most Reverend Timothy P. Broglio, Archbishop for the Military Services of the United States. Welcome to EWTN's coverage of the Knights of Columbus here. Thank you so much, Archbishop. You've been at EWTN before. EWTN works very hard, I believe, to support the military archdiocese and promote chaplaincy. In fact, we're working on a new documentary on Father Capodanno, trying to help promote his cause, of course. So what about your background? You actually started like in the diplomatic corps, right?
That's correct. I was a diplomat for the Holy See for 25 years and finished my diplomatic work as the Apostolic Nuncio in the Dominican Republic and the Apostolic Delegate in Puerto Rico. And it was from there that Pope Benedict asked me to take over the Archdiocese for Military Services.
Which was kind of unusual because you had not have a background of being in the military, right?
That's correct. It was a very, was a unique appointment.
Did you ever understand exactly why they picked you for that, considering you didn't have that background?
I think one of the reasons was about 30% of our military have Spanish as their first language, and I think there was a desire to have a Spanish-speaking shepherd at the head of the Archdiocese.
Right. So what is the military archdiocese? And let me ask you, since we're here at the Knights, what's the connection between the military archdiocese and the Knights of Columbus?
Well, to answer your first question, the military archdiocese is charged with pastoral care of Catholics in the military, their families, in the 153 VA hospitals spread throughout the United States, and in the Puerto Rico and in Guam, and then any Catholic who works for the U.S. federal government outside of the United States. So we serve about 1.8 million Catholics, trying to provide the services that a territorial diocese would offer to the extent that we're able.
Okay.
The Knights of Columbus really support us in three principal ways. One is what they do in every diocese where they're located, and that is formation of men, commitment to Catholic values, growth in those Catholic values, the whole notion of service, which obviously folds very well with what we do in the military. Secondly, they've been extremely supportive of our co-sponsored seminarian program, where we fund the formation of a seminarian for a territorial diocese who will eventually come and serve as a Catholic priest in the military.
So is that part of their signing up, in a sense, getting this support, kind of like what you used to have sometimes with ROTC or other things where you might get some financial support, but you're committing to a certain amount of service?
No, because the financial support actually goes to the diocese.
Okay.
So it is a response to the seminarian's belief that he has this vocation within a vocation, and then the bishop's willingness to participate in the program. And then finally, of course, the Knights of Columbus from the First World War really have been tremendously supportive of the chaplaincy in the military.
Long history of
a
that,
long history of that.
Right. Let me ask you, we talked about the percentage of our first language being Spanish. What's the percentage of, let's say, people who identify as Catholics in the armed services versus the percentage of the chaplains who are Catholic priests?
That's a good question. Roughly 1/4 of the U.S. military identifies as Catholic, which would be basically the national average. We only have 8% of the chaplains.
Really? Okay.
So we're...
And, obviously we all know there's been a priest shortage, let's say, over the years, and though the seminaries seem to be coming back. Are there other reasons besides the fact that there's just fewer priests as to why the percentage would be so low in comparison, let's say, to Protestant ministers?
Well, one thing, of course, is priests are older by the time they're ordained
And that's
because of their training. You know, there's no priest who doesn't have a postgraduate degree. So you're talking about 4 years of university level and then 4 years of postgraduate study. Then I require at least 3 years in a parochial setting, because a priest in the military is going to be on his own. He has to be comfortable and well able to do what he's going to do, because he's not going to have somebody next door to call up.
Yeah. Say, or check on him and make sure everything's okay there.
Exactly.
So what would that be? Let's think age-wise. So the youngest, you typically might have somebody who would say, okay, I've met those minimum requirements. Am I 30 years old already, in my 30s?
Right. I think my youngest priests are about 32 or 33 years old.
Okay.
And that would certainly be older than their Protestant counterparts. That added to also priests have to meet the same physical requirements that an officer in one of the 5 branches of the military has to meet. So, of course, that also reduces the pool from which I can draw.
Right.
Because some people are excluded because of health or because of physical conditions.
Now, you had mentioned also, I guess, people serving overseas who are not in the military. Would that be like State Department officials and other people like that? So you also support them?
Yes, it would be State Department officials, contractors, Department of Defense teachers, all of those categories that people would fall under my
responsibility. Think about normally when we're talking about the military. And is there a need for it? I know the church feels there's a need for it. Are the people serving saying, this is important to us?
Yes, they are. In fact, I was just talking to the parents of a soldier who's over in Iraq, who in the time that he's been in Iraq has never seen a priest.
Really? Okay.
Yes, and unfortunately, I wish that were an isolated incident, but it's not. So we really have to struggle, particularly in deployed locations, to make sure that our men and women in uniform have access to Catholic priests.
Mm-hmm. What about going, so that begs the question, what about going to Mass? I mean, are men serving like that in a sense absolved over the responsibility of going to Mass? They get to see it on TV or anything like that, or how does that work?
Well, if they could see it on TV, that's great. But obviously, the old principle of "a impossibilis nemo tenetur," if it's impossible, you're not held to it.
Right.
Obviously, they can't. They are not obliged. We do try to have lay leaders conduct a Sunday service in the absence of a priest, and that's really the best thing that we can do in those situations.
So what's a lay leader? So I mean, do you have, priests, do you have men who serve who might be deacons or things like that?
We have very few. We have deacons. They're all for civilian dioceses, and so generally they're in the United States. However, we do try to train lay leaders, particularly on ships, smaller ships, so that they would be men and women who have undergone some training and have some ability to at least lead their fellows in prayer.
Right. So if I was in the military and I felt like at some level I was called maybe to help out because there's not enough priests, what do I do?
You'd talk to the chaplain stateside, and he would get you trained up.
Get set up to do that. So in talking to the priests out there or young men who are thinking becoming priests or on their way through seminary, what would you say to them to encourage them for this mission of being a chaplain?
I would say that there is the first thing I think I'd talk about is the need. There's a tremendous need, and really only they can fill it. No one else can take the place of a priest in the chaplaincy. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing that we emphasize is the training that they'll receive, both in counseling. There's also the possibility of doing some clinical pastoral education. So there are many opportunities to receive training that they might not receive in a regular diocesan, or of course we also have religious priests as well. They might not receive in those settings. And thirdly, the opportunity to work with the young. I have the youngest diocese in the United States.
Well, that's true.
My average folks are between the ages of 18 and 28. And so this is an opportunity to influence the future.
Have you seen any correlation between the fact of men who are and women who are interested in serving the military also are interested in their faith?
Very definitely.
Okay.
In 2015, I don't have the 2016 statistics yet, but 2015, of those ordained in the United States, 6% of those ordained priests that year at one point or another wore a uniform of one of the 5 branches. 16% came from families where the mother or father was military. The greatest source of vocations in the United States today is the United States military.
Well, very good. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you for this opportunity.
Archbishop Timothy P. Broglio, Archbishop for the Military Services here in the United States. We're here, of course, at the convention for the Knights of Columbus. Thank you. And we are back live here in Toronto at the Knights of Columbus, of course. Wonderful interview there. I'm joined once again on set by Andrew Walther, who's the Knights of Columbus's Vice President for Communications and Strategic Planning. And of course, this afternoon we have what you call the business session. That's highlighted by really the Supreme Knights address, right? What can we look forward to? Do you think some of the key points Carl Anderson will be hitting in his address?
Well, the Supreme Knights report is sort of like the State of the Union that is given every year in terms of taking a look at the past year's accomplishments and setting the course for the next year. And I think the key highlights this year in the report will be, first, our work with Christians in the Middle East. I think that this is a particular focus. We've raised more than $11 million at christiansatrisk.org, and we've done an enormous amount of good there. We've also advocated very heavily for the Christians there, helping and being instrumental in securing the genocide designation from the U.S. government, from both houses of Congress, the State Department, etc. So we've been very involved in that. I think, second, he will be talking about the importance of the family, the importance of a new program that the Knights of Columbus has launched called the Domestic Church. And this program has one aspect that is based on bringing families closer together in terms of prayer and charitable activity. And also the second half is strengthening our parishes. And that is about having Knights of Columbus councils connect with their parish in an even more meaningful, more robust way to really integrate what we're doing as Knights with what's happening in parishes, and to really make that a seamless kind of experience at the parish level.
It seems to be that many of these things are familiar themes. One of the ones that seems to have been highlighted really over the last year has to do with what's going on in the Middle East and with Christians under attack, let's say. And it seems to be something that Carl Anderson himself has really personally invested in.
I would say that's absolutely true. I mean, the Knights of Columbus have a history of taking care of wanting to protect people that are in this kind of need, that are really marginalized or persecuted for the faith. And we did this in the 1920s when the Mexican government was killing Catholics for being Catholics in the Cristero War. We did this again during the Cold War, where we were very active in supporting the religious freedom of people behind the Iron Curtain, and also even helping to get important books into Eastern Europe for John Paul II. We did this in the 30s. We wrote a letter to FDR demanding that the U.S. government make accommodations for the Jews being persecuted in Germany. And this was in 38, before the war even started. So, I mean, the Knights of Columbus has always stood in solidarity with persecuted people, and especially persecuted Christians around the world. And what's happening in front of us now in Iraq and Syria, Libya, Yemen, this is, by any definition, genocide. And these people are being martyred simply because they're Christian. And I think that that is particularly, when you say we're in the 21st century, I mean, this is a particularly egregious thing because the world is watching it on YouTube.
That's a good point. And also you would think at this day and age that kind of thing wouldn't happen, let alone be allowed to happen.
Yeah, we tend to think, things are so modern, and I spent about a week in Iraq a month and a half ago, and it's so modern in so many ways. You have air conditioning, the electricity, you've got, Toyota cars on the road. I mean, everything is sort of as it should be. And you realize that in a town just like this, 20 miles up the road, these guys came in and killed everybody.
Right. And let me ask you, as far as the Knights of Columbus, now that's something important. Why the Knights? Why do the Knights feel like they should take the lead on something like this? Obviously, Father McGivney, I guess, started really defending the Irish immigrants and those other immigrants, so it fits right in, right?
Well, the Knights of Columbus were founded by men who understood what it was like to be a persecuted minority. And one of the key things the Knights understood from the very beginning was the importance of not allowing groups to be marginalized for the reason simply of their being a part of that group. In the 1920s, we did a book called The Gift of Black Folk with W.E.B. Du Bois, and this is 4 decades before the Civil Rights Movement. We're publishing a book on the historical contributions of Black Americans. We did the same for Jewish Americans and the same for German Americans, who in the aftermath of World War I were pretty well reviled. And even before that, in World War I, we ran what was called the Army Hut program, which was the precursor to the USO. It was sort of hospitality centers for troops near the front and at bases around the country. We've got photos going back that far that show integrated Knights of Columbus and troops at these army huts, and we're talking, again, decades before the Army integrates, decades before the Civil Rights Movement. We didn't draw the color line, and we were written up in the official Black history of World War I as the only group that didn't draw the color line.
I didn't know that. Now, you were talking about publishing something. You mentioned it's Building the Domestic Church, the Family Fully Alive.
Yes.
So this publication here, does this go out to the Knights? What is it?
Yes,
It carries throughout the year. What's in it?
This is a booklet that can be used by any family. It has a series of activities. It has prayer programs and ideas for families to come together with a combination of prayer, readings, meditations, and activities that are focused on living out the faith through particular charitable activity. And it's based on a calendar system. It's a 12-month calendar. Certain things to think about, certain prayers to say, certain activities to engage in. And it's something that I think, Father Peyton always used to say, the family that prays together stays together. And I think that's absolutely true. And there's nothing like both praying together as a family and also living out that love of God through your love of neighbor. And this program allows people to do both.
And right, and our present Holy Father talks about the fact of putting your love into action, and that's really what the Knights are about, right?
Well, absolutely. I mean, the idea of the Knights of Columbus from the beginning has been to strengthen the faith, but not to leave it at that. Pope Francis has said this, Pope Benedict, Pope John Paul, to take it outside of the doors of the church, certainly to be fed spiritually in the church, but then to go out and to be a leaven to the broader community.
Right. Now, one of the areas the Knights have really taken the lead on in many, many years, besides religious freedom, is also battling the culture of death, really promoting the culture of life. Will we hear anything about that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we just last week released some polling which shows that, Americans are strongly in favor of restrictions on abortion, that Americans are strongly opposed to taxpayer funding of abortion. We have looked at this issue now for 8 years, and the number of Americans that want to substantially restrict abortion has always been about 8 and 10. A little more, a little less, but it's always in that 8 and 10 ballpark. And the number of Americans that would restrict abortion, that would basically eliminate well over 90% of abortions, is well over 50%. And so you have solid majorities that would take abortion down to almost nothing, and you have 8 and 10 that would substantially restrict them. So you really have a consensus in this country that goes beyond this pro-life, pro-choice dichotomous label that you see in a lot of the polls that are out there. We've gone a little deeper, and I would say on this issue, people understand that there's another life at stake, and they understand that abortion is not a solution that they want people to reach for.
It's funny, sitting here in the center and in the background, I can see some sisters. I've seen Mother Teresa's orders here, some of their sisters, as well as the Little Sisters of the Poor. So we might see something related to those groups sometime later today, right?
Well, the Little Sisters of the Poor certainly here, and Mother Teresa's nuns, of course, suffered the horrific martyrdom in Yemen at the hands of ISIS. I mean, they've been in a way on the front line of this as well.
And I know you featured them in your issue of Columbia.
And just by virtue of the fact that they were helping people, they were killed. I mean, it's really a remarkable contrast. And I see the Sisters of Life are here too, speaking of the issue of life, protecting life and building a culture of life. And so yes, I mean, are women religious always seem to take a real leadership role in a way in this country. I mean, we have Catholic education today thanks to the Society of Sisters in Oregon, who fought against the Klan, took it all the way to the Supreme Court, and were backed every step of the way by the Knights of Columbus.
Right.
And this is...
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that, but
That's why kids can go to Catholic school
Really?
today.
Okay.
Absolutely.
right. I was reading that, but I hadn't known that before. I have to admit that. Now, I had the pleasure of talking to Archbishop Bergoglio a few
Sure.
minutes ago, and obviously, we all support the chaplaincy. The Knights of Columbus have a special connection when you kind of seems like you connect the fourth degree, that patriotic degree, and that dovetails into its relationship really with the armed services and the chaplaincy corps, right?
Absolutely, and we've organized with them over the last several years seminarian programs. We've organized this Warriors to Lourdes trip that we've done for several years running. I went to several of those, and really, when you see what the church is able to do, I mean, they say there are no atheists in foxholes, and I think no one needs chaplains like military men and women that are in harm's way. And you see this over and over again. Going back to World War I, I mean, we not only sent these army huts, we not only sent these hospitality centers over there and our men over there, we also sent Knights of Columbus chaplains who were Catholic priests to supplement the chaplain corps of the Army in World War I. And so this is something that we understand is absolutely critical to, if you're going to put someone in harm's way physically, they shouldn't be in harm's way spiritually.
Right, and I know we have a clip we think that dovetails into exactly what we're talking about. Some of the work, it's the Iowa plane pull. Let's take a look at this as we wait for the opening session.
We are having our second annual plane pull benefiting Special Olympics Iowa out here at the Des Moines Airport.
We have 38 teams out here today, so 38 teams of 20 people each. Everybody from our athletes to our law enforcement community to just anybody that wanted to come out and support Special Olympics Iowa.
It's just a great cause, and in this state, our committee has raised over $950,000 just this year for our Special Olympics athletes.
I'd say the plane pull was extremely fun because a lot of different athletes came.
It's a thrill rush. To be able to go out there and you're staring down the barrel of the front of the plane, and on the count of three, you try with all your might and realize that first second, it's not going anywhere. But then that plane starts to get moving, you feel a little momentum, and then it's smooth sailing from there.
This is a big support for Special Olympians, and we're all out here today to help make a difference.
The event here is just a ton of fun. There's just a lot of camaraderie among people here. People are coming here from all kinds of backgrounds for one great cause. Doing an event like this at the plane pull is really exactly the reason why I joined the Knights in the first place, being able to help those with intellectual disabilities.
The Knights of Columbus have been a huge supporter of our plane pull for the second year in a row. They were a monetary sponsor as well as got teams together today for the pull.
We're here to help support Special Olympics Iowa. We are unique and special as Knights, but we're also joining the others who are here to support the athletes.
Our partnership with Special Olympics is really bringing our charitable efforts to the forefront. Every time Special Olympics has an activity or a new initiative they want to try, they know they can count on the Knights of Columbus to be part of that with them.
I've been involved with Special Olympics since I was 7, and it gives me so many opportunities to be around people, make them smile.
The great thing about our programs is the Special Olympics athletes get to participate in something and just get a sense of accomplishment. They're so proud of everything that they do, and they always have such a great time doing events like these, doing their athletic competitions.
They are just like everyone else in their minds, in their eyes. They compete, they get gold medals. To see an athlete get a gold medal at our state summer games, it kind of brings tears to my eyes.
This offers our athletes the opportunity to be included. Quite honestly, for them, it's not just about competition, but it's the experience, being alongside their friends, other individuals, even without intellectual disabilities. It's about creating that level of inclusion and friendship.
And we now take you to the opening session where we'll hear from the Supreme Knight, Carl Anderson.
Mexico, the Philippines, Cuba, Poland, Ukraine, Lithuania, and South Korea, we gather in the historic city of Toronto to rededicate ourselves to the mission entrusted to us by our founder, the venerable Father Michael J. McGivney. Father McGivney founded the Knights of Columbus with laymen from his parish in 1882. He recognized the need to strengthen the faith of Catholic men and to provide financial security for their families. Much has changed since 1882, but the need for the Knights of Columbus has never been greater. Today, the Knights of Columbus is the largest fraternal association of Catholic men in the world, now with more than 1.9 million members. I now call upon our Supreme Chaplain, Archbishop William Lori, to lead us in prayer.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. O Father of infinite glory, dwelling in unapproachable light, we give you thanks and praise. For in your goodness you have given us your only begotten Son, our Lord Jesus Christ, who is the light of the world and the true light who enlightens everyone. In your goodness, pour out your Holy Spirit upon us as we gather for the 134th Supreme Convention of the Knights of Columbus, so that the light of Christ might dwell brightly in our midst and in the hearts of each member of the family of the Knights of Columbus. Be with us as we pray, as we reflect upon the work of the order and renewed ties of friendship and fraternity. Help us in these days and in all days to come to discover anew how we are called to bear witness to Christ and his light in our world, to become disciples who are salt and light in the world today. Enable us, O Father, to live to the fullness, to live to the fullest, our first principle of charity, so that through works of mercy and service, the light and the joy of the gospel might shine forth in imitation of our venerable founder, Father Michael J. McGivney. Assembled as the family of the Knights of Columbus, we ask your special blessing upon our beloved Holy Father, Pope Francis. Give us the grace to heed his call to be missionary disciples who radiate God's love through works of mercy and self-giving love. Bless the cardinals, bishops, and priests who grace us with their presence. Help us, Lord, to bear witness to the light and beauty of your truth and your love. We beg your blessing, Lord, upon the elected officials and leaders of all the countries represented at this convention, and we ask you to bestow your choicest blessings upon our worthy Supreme Knight Carl Anderson, upon his wife Dorian, and upon their family and loved ones. Bless our Supreme Knight as he leads and guides the order to the glory of your name, even as you sustain in your goodness the officers and the board of directors of our order, as well as the state deputies and all the delegates to this Supreme Convention, together with their families and loved ones. May our convention be marked by a growth in charity, unity, fraternity, and patriotism, such that we, the family of the Knights of Columbus, will bear clear and convincing witness to your Son, Jesus, the light of the world, who lives and reigns with you in the unity of the Holy Spirit, one God forever and ever. Amen. Let us now pray for the canonization of the venerable servant of God, Father Michael J. McGivney. Let us pray together. God, our Father, protector of the poor and defender of the widow and orphan, you called your priest, Father Michael J. McGivney, to be an apostle of Christian family life and to lead the young to the generous service of their neighbor. Through the example of his life and virtue, may we follow your Son, Jesus Christ, more closely, fulfilling his commandment of charity and building up his body, which is the church. Let the inspiration of your servant prompt us to greater confidence in your love, so that we may continue his work of caring for the needy and the outcast. We humbly ask that you glorify your venerable servant, Father Michael J. McGivney, on earth, according to the design of your holy will. Through his intercession, grant the favor I now present. Through Christ our Lord. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Vivat Jesus. Vivat Jesus.
And now please remain standing for the presentation of the national colors by the Toronto Police Service. And as the flags come forward, let us pause to remember our respective homelands, and in our hearts make an act of loyalty to all our countries. Present the colors. Please join me in thanking the Toronto Police Service Chiefs Ceremonial Unit. Please be seated. In 2001, at the Basilica of Our Lady of Guadalupe in Mexico City, I was installed as Supreme Knight, and together with the Board of Directors, we dedicated the Order of the Knights of Columbus to Our Lady of Guadalupe. Her miraculous appearance to St. Juan Diego nearly 500 years ago changed the course of history, initiating the greatest evangelization in the history of Christianity. In these days, we invoke Our Lady's intercession for the unity and harmony of all her children throughout the world as we look to her as the star of a new evangelization. And so, as we do every year, I ask my brother knights here assembled that by your standing applause, you join me in renewing the dedication of the Knights of Columbus to Our Lady of Guadalupe, Mother of the Civilization of Love. Thank you, and please be seated. At this time, I want to express my gratitude to the Ontario Knights, who serve as our convention hosts here in Toronto. Under the leadership of State Deputy Alain Caillé, you have provided us with a very warm welcome. State conventions have been held here in Toronto. Supreme conventions have been held here in Toronto on 4 other occasions. In 1936, 1944, 1972, and most recently in 2001, my first Supreme Convention as Supreme Knight. So I am especially happy to be back here with all of you in the great city of Toronto. Canada was the site of the first international expansion of the Knights of Columbus in 1897, when Montreal Council 284 was chartered. The first council in this province was Ottawa Council 485, begun in the year 1900. And the Ontario State Council was founded 4 years later. Today there are more than 55,000 Brother Knights and 570 councils across Ontario. A number of our Order's international leaders have come from Ontario, including former Deputy Supreme Knight Ernest Wolfe. In addition, 9 other former Supreme Directors have come from Ontario, and with us today are former Supreme Directors Grant Ertl and Nat Gallo. Our Order has a proud past and an even brighter future here in the province of Ontario. As we begin our convention here in Toronto, I also take this occasion to express our gratitude to His Eminence, Thomas Cardinal Collins, who next year will mark a decade of service as Shepherd of the Church in Toronto. Your Eminence, thank you for a truly beautiful Mass which opened our Supreme Convention, and in particular for your inspiring homily. Each year, our Supreme Convention is honored by the participation of many members of the hierarchy, and this is the case again this year, as we welcome more than 100 bishops, including 12 cardinals, representing every nation in which the Order is active, the Vatican, and an especially significant delegation of bishops from the Middle East and Eastern Rite churches in union with the Holy See. Your Eminences, your Beatitude, your Graces, and your Excellencies, we deeply appreciate your presence here at the Supreme Convention and for your support at home in your diocese day in and day out. On behalf of all my Brother Knights, I thank all the bishops who are with us in person and those with us in spirit for your friendship and support. And I ask again my Brother Knights to join me in expressing our gratitude to you. We also have with us a number of distinguished guests. Monsignor Brian Bransfeld, General Secretary of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. Monsignor Walter Rossi, Rector of the Basilica of the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception. Monsignor Eduardo Chavez, Canon of the Basilica of Our Lady of Guadalupe and postulator of the cause of canonization of St. Juan Diego. Father Brian Kolodechuk, postulator of the cause for canonization of Mother Teresa of Calcutta. Father Antonio Lopez, Provost of the Pontifical John Paul II Institute for Studies on Marriage and Family. Father Thomas Rosica, CEO of Salt and Light Television of Canada and English language assistant to the Holy See's press office. And I will say the main organizer of St. John Paul II's last World Youth Day here in Toronto in 2001. Father Henry Sands, the Executive Director of the Bureau of Catholic Indian Missions. President John Garvey of the Catholic University of America. And the Honorable Andrew Bennett, former Canadian Ambassador for Religious Freedom. Welcome to you all. According to our tradition, the Supreme Council has requested messages of greeting from the heads of state of the nations in which our order is established, as well as many distinguished ecclesial officials. And we are again honored this year to have received a special message from our Holy Father, Pope Francis, conveyed through a letter from the Vatican Secretary of State. To read the papal message, it is my pleasure to call upon Bishop Douglas Crosby of Hamilton, Ontario, the President of the Canadian Conference of Catholic Bishops. And as is our tradition, please join me in standing while the papal message is read.
From the Vatican, 11th of July, 2016. Dear Mr. Anderson, His Holiness Pope Francis has been informed that from the 2nd to the 4th of August 2016, the 134th Supreme Convention of the Knights of Columbus will be held in Toronto, Canada. He has asked me to convey his warm, good wishes to all present, together with the assurance of his closeness in prayer. The theme of this year's meeting, A Light to the Nations, stresses the missionary spirit which has characterized your order from its earliest days as a fraternal association committed to strengthening the faith of its members and assisting those in need through corporal and spiritual works of mercy. In fidelity to the vision of the Venerable Michael McGivney, the Knights have consistently sought to embody the missionary dimension of our Christian faith, which finds its highest expression in service to the Lord in the least of his brothers and sisters. As Pope Francis has insisted, all of us who have known the love of God in Christ Jesus are called to be missionary disciples, proclaiming the joy of the gospel by our generosity and concern for the needs of those around us. That same missionary spirit has been evidenced in the traditional support of the Knights of Columbus for the needs of the universal church, and in an exemplary way for the intentions of the successor of Peter. Especially close to the Holy Father's heart in these days are the afflictions of our brothers and sisters in Christ throughout the world, suffering from poverty, injustice, exile, and increasingly violent persecution. He once more thanks the Knights for the strenuous efforts being made to defend their human rights and legitimate aspirations in the public forum and to provide for their needs, particularly through the Christian Refugee Relief Fund and numerous other initiatives of practical support and solidarity. In these days, as the Church celebrates the extraordinary Jubilee of Mercy, he asks the Knights and their families to pray in a particular way for an outpouring of God's mercy and the grace of conversion upon all those whose hearts have been darkened by hatred, brutality, and ruthless disregard for human life and dignity. At every level, the Knights of Columbus have always been concerned to accompany men in their Christian vocation, especially as husbands and fathers, and to support the Church's efforts to build strong Catholic families. This support was especially evident in the Knights' contribution to two significant events in the life of the Universal Church during the past year, dealing with the family and its mission: the World Meeting of Families in Philadelphia and the Synod of Bishops on the Family. As those events made clear, His Holiness stressed in his post-synodal apostolic exhortation, Amoris Laetitia, it is in the heart of the family as a domestic church that Christian spouses are called to exercise their baptismal mission of bearing witness to the faithful love and redemptive grace of Christ. At a time when the natural institution of marriage is gravely threatened, not least by the legislative proposals that disregard its specific character, this witness is essential for the defense of the family and the strengthening of its indispensable role in fostering the growth of individuals in maturity, the cultivation of community values, and the moral progress of society as a whole. The Holy Father trusts that the Knights' new initiative, Building the Domestic Church While Strengthening Our Parish, will assist parents in their efforts to foster an environment of prayer and closeness to the Lord at home, and to participate actively as a family in the liturgical and apostolic life of the local church. Fathers have an essential mission in this regard as models and guides for their children, especially as teachers of prayer. As His Holiness has insisted, it is essential that children see that for both their parents, prayer is something truly important. Indeed, moments of family prayer and acts of devotion can be more powerful for evangelization than any catechism class or sermon. In St. Joseph, protector of the Holy Family and patron of the Universal Church, Christian fathers will find an inspiring example of quiet, masculine strength and fidelity to their own vocation within the family. With these sentiments, the Holy Father commends the deliberation of the Supreme Convention to the intercession of Mary, Mother of the Church, and assures the Knights and their families of a special remembrance in his prayers. With great affection, he imparts his apostolic blessing as a pledge of strength and peace in the Lord. Yours sincerely, Pietro Cardinal Parolin, Secretary of State.
Please be seated. Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Now to read the greeting from the Prime Minister of Canada. It is my pleasure to call upon State Deputy Carl Brosh of Manitoba, President of the Canadian Association of the Knights of Columbus.
Dear friends, I am pleased to extend my warmest greetings to everyone attending the 134th Annual Meeting of the Knights of Columbus Supreme Council in Toronto. Members of the Knights of Columbus, now 1.9 million strong, are known and respected for their devotion to improving the communities in which they live. They are guided by a faithful commitment to Christian values and informed by 4 core principles: charity, unity, fraternity, and patriotism. This international convention is an excellent opportunity to take stock of your achievements and to plan for the year ahead. I would like to commend the Knights of Columbus for helping others in times of need. Your actions shine a light in the world and are an inspiration to all Canadians. On behalf of the Government of Canada, I offer my best wishes for a productive and enjoyable convention. Sincerely, Right Honorable Justin P.J. Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada.
Thank you very much. We are also pleased to have received a message from the President of the United States, which reads as follows. I send greetings to all those gathered at the 134th Supreme Convention of the Knights of Columbus. Throughout our nation's history, women and men of faith have taken steps to lift up the poor, feed the hungry, and welcome the stranger among us. By extending a hand of friendship and working to improve the lives of those in your community, you are continuing this legacy and reminding us not only of the responsibilities we have to one another, but also of faith's role in building a brighter tomorrow. As you gather in Toronto, you have my best for a memorable event, signed Barack Obama. And now to read the greeting from the President of the Philippines, I call upon Supreme Director Alonzo Tan of Luzon.
Thank you, Worthy Supreme Knight. It is my distinct honor and privilege to read to you the message of President Rodrigo Duterte of the Republic of the Philippines. Malacanang Palace, Manila. My warmest greetings and felicitations to the Knights of Columbus as you hold your 134th Convention, Supreme Convention in Toronto. More than 100 years, the Knights of Columbus has always been of great help, not only to its members, but also to the whole society. We are always there for the Filipino members and their families in time of need, sickness, and loss. Because of this, you have become one of the most commendable fraternal organizations here in the Philippines. May you continue your charitable work with our country and help in alleviating the living condition of our people. It is our common duty and calling to preserve the life and dignity of every man, woman, and child. I highly appreciate all your efforts in supporting our brothers and sisters in times of tragedy. I wish you all members and the Knights of Columbus more power. Rodrigo Rua Duterte, President. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. To read the greeting from the President of Poland, I call upon our founding Territorial Deputy of Poland, Andrzej Gut-Mostowy.
Dear Knights of Columbus, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to extend warm greetings to all the delegates and participants of the 134th Supreme Convention of the Knights of Columbus taking place in Toronto. Several days ago, in my birthplace in Krakow, His Holiness Pope Francis hosted a meeting of Catholic youth who arrived from all corners of the world. I am certain that the Supreme Convention of the Knights of Columbus will overflow with the same levels of enthusiasm and spirit of faith as took place during the 31st World Youth Day in Poland. For over 130 years, the Order of the Knights of Columbus has propagated the teaching of the Catholic Church, which are very close to the citizens of the Republic of Poland. Tirelessly, it also undertakes charitable activities to all around the world. Through the theme of this Supreme Convention, A Light to the Nation, we are bringing attention to the meaning of the altruistic ideals and the need for solidarity and undertaking good. Today's world presents serious challenges to Christians, among which are these connected to ever-increasing injustice and poverty. The Order of the Knights of Columbus works everywhere where people need aid, support, and fraternal love. I am pleased that the Knights of Columbus are also present in Poland. Thank you for strengthening the knightly charismas of charity, unity, fraternity, and patriotism among my countrymen. These values are very close to the Poles, and my country has a long history of charity. I hope for the continued active development the Order of the Knights of Columbus in Poland. Once again, I sincerely greet all participants of the Supreme Convention in Toronto and wish you unshakable determination in spreading Christian values in the contemporary world. Andrzej Duda, President of the Republic of Poland.
Thank you very much. We've received many gracious and inspiring greetings from distinguished leaders of church and state, too many to be read at this time. Therefore, I hereby request that the Supreme Secretary include each of them in the proceedings of this meeting. The next order of business is the reports of the Supreme Officers, and for that purpose, I now turn the gavel over to our Deputy Supreme Knight, Logan Ludwig.
Your Eminences, your Beatitude, your Graces, your Excellencies, Reverend Clergy, Religious, Supreme Directors, my brother knights, ladies, and guests. It is my very great honor as Deputy Supreme Knight to present for the purpose of making his annual report on the state of the order, our worthy Supreme Knight, Carl A. Anderson.
Thank you very much. Please be seated. My brother knights, here in Ontario, as throughout our continent, the land was baptized through the sacrifice of missionaries. Their sacrifice brought the light of faith to a continent. They knew the danger, yet they still came, never counting the cost. Some came to Canada once. Others risked coming back again. They were men of faith, like Jesuit Father Jean de Brebeuf, who in 1649 was tortured and killed less than 2 hours north of where we meet today. Together with his companions, he endured one of the most horrific martyrdoms ever recorded in the history of Christianity. Following his capture and throughout his ordeal, Brebeuf suffered fearlessly. In the face of terrible torment, he continued to be a missionary focused on the needs of others. He showed throughout his final hours concern for his Huron brothers and sisters in the faith, as well as for the souls of his tormentors. Jean de Brebeuf endured the hardships of a new world, not to gain great wealth or power. He came to Canada not to find something great. He came to share his friendship with Jesus Christ, with those who one day be his friends, if not in this life, then in the next. He was a man for others. He came to serve. He learned the Huron Wyandot language, wrote a dictionary, translated the catechism, and composed the first Canadian Christmas carol, the Huron Carol, written in their own language. The early missionaries, including Canada's first bishop, Saint Francois de Laval, came to share their greatest gift, the light of faith. These missionaries to be worth any sacrifice of their own lives. More than 200 years later, another man of God came to Canada. Like the missionaries before him, he knew that his and early death during an era when the average parish priest was young. But he was determined. He traveled to Montreal to study for the priesthood And once ordained, he worked tirelessly to bring the light of faith, not to the native people of New France, but to the immigrant families of New England. He lived his short life heroically. He made an incredible impact. And because of the heroic virtue of that young priest, we are here today. In founding the Knights of Columbus, Father Michael J. McGivney established a brotherhood of men who would help bring the light of faith to their families and their communities through their prayers and through their charity. And as we meet in Canada, we recall that this country was the first to which the Knights of Columbus expanded, just 15 years after our founding in New Haven. Canada has been key to both our order's expansion and to our faithful witness. Toronto itself was the site of St. John Paul II's final World Youth Day in 2002, of which the Knights of Columbus was a major sponsor. Like Father McGivney and the Canadian missionaries before him, our love of God witnesses to a faith built on love, not just of our neighbor, but even of those who say they are our enemies. This is the Christian difference. This is the faith that lights our path. And my brother Knights, all of us are called to a vocation. And as Knights of Columbus, as men dedicated to charity, unity, and fraternity, our vocation is to a love of God lived out through service to our neighbor. Now, there are many organizations of Catholic men, but no other strengthens the faith of its members while also doing so much good for its neighbors. As brothers in the faith, the good we do can truly be a charity that evangelizes. And here in Canada, a land that was the home to the nations of the Iroquois Confederacy, a land where the light of faith has shone brightly, we recall the words from the 49th chapter of Isaiah. I will make you a light to the nations, that my salvation may reach the ends of the earth. We also recall the words of Pope Francis. He has called Catholics to a new sense of missionary discipleship and fraternal brotherhood. He has urged Catholics to go out to the peripheries, and he has placed, as we heard in his letter to us just minutes ago, he has placed great confidence in the Knights of Columbus. And so I am pleased to announce the theme of our 134th Supreme Convention, A Light to the Nations. My brother Knights, over the past year, because of your charity, our light has shone brightly. We have brought that light to the ends of the earth. In a world that has forgotten that love is the vocation of every person, we witness to that vocation, not just with words, but with actions. Pope Francis has said, to love God and neighbor is not something abstract, but something profoundly concrete. It means seeing in every person the face of the Lord to be served and to serve him concretely. My brother Knights, we continue to be a stellar example of just such concrete service to our neighbor. For the 17th consecutive year, we set a new record for charitable giving. In 2015, we donated more than $175 million, an increase of more than $1.5 million over last year. Texas led all jurisdictions with $10.4 million in charitable giving. California came in second with $7 million. And they were followed by Florida, Quebec, Illinois, Michigan, Ontario, New York, Missouri, and New Jersey. Our volunteer hours added up to a record 73.5 million hours. And Brother Knights in Luzon North led the way with a total of 5.5 million volunteer hours. Texas followed with 5.2 million, and they were followed by Illinois, Florida, California, Luzon South, Ontario, Michigan, Visayas, and Pennsylvania. Overall, each Brother Knight dedicated an entire work week last year of volunteer service. Now, Independent Sector, a network for nonprofits, has listed the value of a 2015 volunteer hour at $23. So using that figure, the time we donated to charity last year was worth more than $1.7 billion. And in the past decade, we have donated 700 million hours. So the value of that service totals more than $15 billion. One of our signature programs is Coats for Kids. Last season, we distributed 80,592 new winter coats. And since the program began in 2009, we have given out more than 310,000 new coats to needy children. Our Supreme Chaplain, Archbishop Lori, joined an inner-city coat distribution in West Baltimore, where he helped distribute 1,000 coats to children at St. Edward Parish. And we also partner, and in this effort, we also partner with police and firefighters. Knights in Omaha worked with the North Omaha Police to distribute 600 coats while they were on patrol. And in New Haven, I joined Connecticut Knights, police and firefighters to give new coats to children at John Martinez Magnet School. We have a long history of finding great partners in charity. And again this year, we teamed up with professional athletes to do that. Prior to the Super Bowl last February, Knights from Council 12683 distributed coats at an inner-city Catholic school in San Francisco. They were joined by Football Hall of Famers Anthony Munoz and Dave Casper, Oakland Raiders head coach Jack Del Rio and his wife Linda, and current NFL players and coaches. More than 270 students at Our Lady of Visitation School received new coats with the help of Catholic Athletes for Christ, the Raiders Foundation, the Jack and Linda Del Rio Foundation, and the Munoz Foundation. Now, like Coats for Kids, our Food for Families program continues to expand. And last year, we collected more than 11.4 million pounds of food and $7.2 million in donations for soup kitchens and other food programs. In Vancouver, Canadian Knights gathered food and donations to support the Friends in Need Thanksgiving food drive. In Luzon South, Council 13553 provides food and multivitamins to elementary school students to ensure that these kids get a balanced diet. Our councils also help give shelter. Last year, we donated $667,000 and 1,150,000 volunteer hours to Habitat for Humanity. And for the third year in a row, the Supreme Council donated $75,000 to the New Haven Habitat for Humanity, and we helped build a new home for a family in our founding city. Members of Council 12240 in Florida helped build a 6-unit complex for Habitat for Humanity. We have also brought mobility to thousands through our 7-year partnership with the Global Wheelchair Mission. And last year, we distributed more than 8,000 wheelchairs in countries such as Chile, Mexico, Poland, Philippines, Ukraine, and Vietnam. Since 2002, we have given the gift of mobility to more than 57,000 people. Our Brother Knights in Ukraine raise money locally and throughout North America to buy medicine and equipment for hospitals, and especially a children's hospital in Lviv. They also distributed 1,500 wheelchairs through their partnership with the Canadian Wheelchair Foundation. And Caritas Ukraine recently launched a new wheelchair project with the help of British Columbia Knights and the Canadian Wheelchair Foundation. In February, Dorian and I joined our fellow Supreme Directors and their wives for a wheelchair distribution at the Basilica of Our Lady of Guadalupe in Mexico City. That occasion marked a major milestone: 50,000 wheelchairs distributed through our partnership with the Global Wheelchair Mission. In other areas, we gave $3.8 million to help the elderly, $3 million for hospitals and healthcare facilities, and $7 million for community projects. In addition, we gave $4.5 million to help people with physical disabilities. And we continue our support of people with intellectual disabilities. Since the first World Games in 1968, Special Olympics has been able to count on the Knights of Columbus. And last summer, we gave $1.4 million for the World Games held in Los Angeles. We helped make those games a great success by covering the costs, including food and transportation, for every American and Canadian athlete while they were in Los Angeles. And along with our financial support, more than 1,000 Brother Knights and their families volunteered at the Los Angeles Games. And for these efforts, the Knights of Columbus was honored as a founding champion of the World Games. Our relationship with Special Olympics remains strong. Last year, our councils donated more than $14 million to Special Olympics and other programs for people with intellectual disabilities. And along with this financial support, more than 79,000 Brother Knights volunteered nearly 980,000 hours at about 23,000 Special Olympics events. Again this year, the Indiana State Council, together with Catholic Athletes for Life and Special Olympics Indiana, sponsored a mini football combine for Special Olympics athletes so that they could also experience a training day with NFL athletes similar to those run for college players. Also in Indiana, College Knights from Notre Dame Council 1477 continue to support Corvilla, an organization that provides housing and services for people with intellectual and physical disabilities. These Notre Dame Knights provide financial support from their football stake sales, and they volunteer at the facility throughout the year. In Iowa, Brother Knights helped raise $100,000 by participating in the Special Olympics Iowa plane pull. And even in Rome, we hosted a Special Olympics event at one of our athletic fields as part of Special Olympics European Football Week. The tournament, which we co-sponsored with the Italian Football Association, included teams from Italy, France, Lithuania, Poland, and Hungary. We also organize blood drives throughout the year. Since sponsoring the first U.S. National Blood Drive in 1938, we have continued as leaders in this important work. Last year alone, we enlisted the support of 393,000 blood donors. New Hampshire Knights partnered with the Red Cross in that state to enhance blood drives as part of a 2-year initiative to double the amount of blood collected. They also are raising funds to purchase a mobile blood collection vehicle. Through charitable activities like these, the Knights of Columbus is an excellent example of how Catholics serve others. We are also an example for young people as they learn how Catholic men should live out their faith. But our witness to youth does not stop there. Our Brother Knights work directly with youth on various programs to help them grow in their faith, extend their knowledge, and develop their athletic skills. During the past year, nearly 155,000 youth participated in over 3,700 Knights of Columbus free throw competitions. And in addition, our Soccer Challenge program saw nearly 19,500 participants in 1,400 events. In Mindanao, Council 6591 helped provide medical care for children, especially those in poor neighborhoods. And in Colorado, Council 9597 donated tablet computers to Our Lady of Fatima School to allow access to dozens of online learning applications. For more than half a century, our Catholic Information Service has provided quality catechetical materials to young people and all those interested in learning about our faith. And these catechetical materials that are now available in English, Spanish, and French are accessible online to every Catholic in the world. They are also an important part of our Building the Domestic Church initiative. This year, we've continued our partnership with Presidium to provide our members with the most up-to-date resources available to ensure a safe environment for our children. Through this partnership, Knights involved in youth programs have access to online training, background screening, and reporting services. We also supported major educational projects. During the last academic year, the Supreme Council funded 651 college scholarships worth nearly $2 million. We also provided $7.1 million in other scholarships and an additional $1.6 million for athletic programs. In all, last year we gave more than $19 million to youth programs. "30 years ago, St. John Paul II founded World Youth Day. This year, World Youth Day was held in his hometown of Krakow. And as in other World Youth Days, we took an active role. We sponsored, this year, the Mercy Center, the premier location for the English-speaking pilgrims from around the world. More than 100,000 pilgrims benefited from the programs and speakers at our site. And at the Mercy Center, Polish Knights and a team from the Supreme Council worked with the Sisters of Life, the Sisters of Our Lady of Mercy, and the St. John Paul II National Shrine in Washington, D.C. Among our other partners were Salt and Light Television and Holy Cross Family Ministries. The Mercy Center also hosted the bishops' conferences of the United States, Canada, and Australia, and it was the site of the final gathering of Pope Francis with pilgrims at World Youth Day. At World Youth Day, we help to build a brighter future for our church. But there are other Christians who some have said must have no future. These are the Christians in the Middle East who have been targeted for extinction by genocide. In Iraq, Syria, and neighboring countries, Christians and other religious minorities are facing extinction. Many receive no support from their governments or from the United Nations. They have had to rely on their fellow Christians, and they have been able to rely on the Knights of Columbus. Since 2014, we have raised more than $11 million for Christian refugees, and that money has been a lifeline. We provided more than $800,000 to feed 13,500 families in Erbil, Iraq. We also support medical clinics there and long-term infrastructure projects, including a 120 apartment unit housing to provide for permanent housing for these refugees. We also provided financial support to all the Syriac Catholic priests exiled from Mosul after it fell to ISIS in 2014. And we supported catechetical classes for Syriac and Chaldean Catholics. In Syria, we have assisted the besieged Christians of Aleppo. They are determined to remain in the land where St. Paul was baptized, and we are determined to help them. We have also helped those who have had to flee to other countries. In Jordan, we partnered with Catholic Relief Services to support educational initiatives for refugees. And in Lebanon, we supported a variety of programs. These efforts depend upon the active involvement of our Brother Knights. Some have donated to our Christian Refugee Relief Fund. Others have responded by participating in our Solidarity Cross program, through our councils, which have sold more than 82,000 olive wood crosses made by Christians in the Holy Land. Council 2473 in Virginia sold 620 crosses and collected $12,453 for refugees. And the first cross the council sold was to Bishop Paul Laverty. In California, Council 10981 at the Chaldean Cathedral there raised and donated more than $600,000 in support of Christian refugees. Council 9544 in Ottawa worked with their parish to welcome and support a Christian refugee family from Syria. And now the council is raising funds to sponsor 2 more refugee families. Today, we are honored to have with us bishops and priests who stand on the front line of this horrible persecution of Christians. Surely you and your communities are today that light of which the prophet Isaiah spoke, not only to your own nations, but to all the nations of the world. Please stand and know that the Knights of Columbus are in solidarity with you. We continue to assist young people in Uganda and Kenya by working with the Apostles of Jesus to provide care, shelter, and education for African AIDS orphans, many of whom have tested positive for HIV. We have helped to provide medical care. We built a school and a dormitory in Uganda and have purchased a school bus in Kenya. We continue our humanitarian aid in Africa by supporting the work of the organization Charity Water. We are building 20 new clean water wells that will save lives and improve the health of thousands. It is one concrete way we work to apply the principles of our Holy Father's encyclical Laudato Si. Our charity is a light to the nations. It is a powerful witness of love of neighbor that reaches to every corner of our world. Our charity is motivated by faith, and our faith is a gift to be shared. When we bring new men into the Order of the Knights of Columbus, we give them the opportunity to be better Catholics, and we multiply the good works that we can do. And I am pleased to report that our membership grew for the 44th consecutive year to a record high of 1,918,122. Soon we will number more than 2 million men, and never before in the history of our order have we had so many men doing so much good. We also had the 79th year of local council growth. We added 246 new councils for a total of 15,342 councils. In Ukraine, we now have 566 Brother Knights in 13 councils. And because of this, the Supreme Directors voted in April to establish Ukraine as our newest territory. So would our Brother Knights from Ukraine please stand and be recognized? Impressive growth continues in Poland. In April, I attended the Polish State Convention celebrating the 10th anniversary of the Knights of Columbus there. The convention mass included our act of consecration to the Holy Family in the presence of our order's Holy Family traveling image. In 1 decade, we have grown in Poland to nearly 90 local councils with nearly 4,400 members. Earlier this year, I had the privilege of meeting Poland's new president, Andrzej Duda, during his visit to Washington. He personally thanked me for the contribution Polish Knights have already made to their country. And I assured him that we have only just begun. In neighboring Lithuania, the order is also active and growing. At the Congress of Mercy in Vilnius, there was a procession led by the Vatican Secretary of State, Cardinal Pietro Parolin. It included an image of Divine Mercy carried by Lithuanian Knights of Columbus. Our college councils continue to thrive. This year, we added 25 new college councils, with 12 in the United States and 13 in the Philippines. We now have 27,535 college Knights at 348 college councils. And during the last fraternal year, college Knights donated more than $370,000 to charity and 500,000 volunteer hours. Purdue University Council 15144 hosted a basketball tournament to raise awareness and financial aid for Christian refugees. And last October, we marked the 50th College Council Conference with more than 200 college Knights from nearly 90 schools. Council 2782 at the University of Illinois was named Outstanding College Council for programs that included seminarian dinners, support for Special Olympics, blood drives, and aid to the homeless, along with strong membership growth. Every council should strive for just such excellence, and many thousands of our councils do through our Star Council program. This year, 2,178 councils achieved Star Council. And I want to thank every council that achieved this important status. Your good works shine as a bright light in your parish and your community. And I encourage all councils, and especially every new council, to become a Star Council. And to help every council achieve excellence, we have recently developed new fraternal training webinars. These webinars will help councils become more efficient, more effective, and every council should use these new tools. Father McGivney came of age in a country terribly wounded by civil war. He saw a people in desperate need of charity, unity, and brotherly fraternity. He reached out to the Catholic men around him to bring to life a new organization, one that offered hope, because Catholic men were determined to act on their principles. My brother Knights, look around you. Do you see a world today less in need of charity, less in need of unity, less in need of fraternity than in Father McGivney's day? Father McGivney reached out to the Catholic men of his day to make that day better. And we must do the same. We have always been an organization for men in every age, and we must continue to be an organization for men of every age. Whether they are college age or retirement age, there is a place for every man in the Knights of Columbus. Every Catholic man who joins us can become stronger in his faith through our spiritual and our charitable programs. We can build a better world together, one council at a time. But to do that, we must reach out to more men and grow our ranks. And for those young husbands and fathers who may think that membership in the Knights of Columbus takes time away from their families, I would ask them to remember that the Knights of Columbus is one of the most family-centered Catholic men's organizations in the world. In his recent apostolic exhortation, Pope Francis asks, who is making an effort to strengthen marriages, to help married couples overcome their problems, to assist them in the work of raising children, and to encourage the stability of the marriage bond? Well, we answer the Knights of Columbus. Because the light of faith is first transmitted within the family and then nurtured within the parish, we have started new programs to strengthen both our families and our parishes. They especially give young fathers the tools they need to bring their families closer together and closer to God. These programs are also concrete ways in which we can reach out to accompany wounded families. At our last Supreme Convention, we launched the Holy Family Prayer Program with a beautiful image of the Holy Family. In every jurisdiction, Knights have brought this program into their parishes. More than 1,310,000 participants have participated in 6,859 prayer services through our Holy Family Prayer Program. And our program, entitled Building the Domestic Church, the Family Fully Alive, includes monthly themes, meditations, scripture readings, and activities for the whole family. It is a program for all families, but it is designed especially for young families. It can help families that need new ways to bring the light of the gospel into their homes. And our family consecration to the Holy Family program will strengthen families spiritually by inviting into their homes the example of Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. Our Supreme Chaplain has written an act of consecration to the Holy Family, which I encourage every Knights of Columbus council and every Knights of Columbus family to embrace. And I encourage our councils to make this prayer available in every parish. Imagine millions of Catholic families consecrated to the Holy Family, leading a new evangelization of family life. And the Knights of Columbus can do this. We can do this. Last November, we announced another new initiative, Building the Domestic Church through Strengthening Our Parish. It combines two great traditions of the Knights of Columbus, building up Catholic family life and strengthening parish life. Our councils strive within a parish, and every parish can be strengthened by the work of a Knights of Columbus council. Within the parish, we can be a leaven and we can be a witness. With our thousands of parish-based councils, it is time that the Knights of Columbus step up and be that dynamic engine within the parish to support family life and to provide new charitable initiatives. With these new programs, we can call thousands of men to greater spiritual formation and greater evangelical and charitable action. And these programs will do one more thing. They will help make our parishes more family-friendly, especially for young families. Now, I ask each of you to take to heart our responsibility as leaders of the most important Catholic men's organization in the world. What we do in our families and in our parishes will change the history of the Catholic Church in our communities, and it will help ensure the future of our parishes. The strong right arm of the Catholic Church must also be the strong right arm of our parish church. Today, this is what it means to be a light to the nations. When a bishop or pastor looks for a men's organization to help him revitalize a parish, he should look first to the Knights of Columbus. He should do this because we are men who witness to our faith and who bring with us programs designed to strengthen our families and our parishes. We seek a new alignment between our councils and our parishes, one that will strengthen both. And as we align councils more closely with our parishes, this must include our youth programs. Before the end of this summer, I would ask that each Grand Knight meet with his pastor to discuss how his council can better support parish activities, including youth ministries. And he should discuss how our domestic church programs can be put at the service of his parish. The Knights of Columbus is a vital force, not only in family life and in our parishes, but also in our communities, through both our charity and our civic involvement. The fourth degree, our patriotic degree, embodies the great love and respect we have for our home countries and for the brave men and women who defend them. Last year, 6,157 Knights joined our patriotic degree, bringing our fourth degree membership to a record of 353,334. We also added 78 new assemblies, bringing their total to 3,331. Led by our Sir Knights, the Knights of Columbus is one of the largest partners of the Department of Veterans Affairs. We provided more than 100,000 hours of service at 134 VA centers. And this service to our men and women in uniform has a long and proud history in the Knights of Columbus. Beginning 100 years ago and throughout the First World War, we established facilities at bases in the United States and throughout Europe in support of our military forces. From London and Paris to Siberia, we made an important difference. In more than 150 facilities that were the precursors of today's USO centers, we provided support for troops during their training and then during their deployment at the front. For the many American soldiers who had never before even met a Catholic, we showed the light of faith through our charity, and the needs we addressed were not only physical. We also helped provide Catholic chaplains. In fact, the last American serviceman killed in the First World War was a Knight of Columbus and a Catholic chaplain, Lieutenant William Davitt. Our work during World War I was ahead of its time in many ways. For example, the Knights of Columbus never drew the color line. We had racially integrated centers nearly 5 decades before the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and 3 decades before the U.S. Army itself integrated. During the Second World War, Knights in Canada and the Philippines continued to run similar centers, while the USO took responsibility for American troops. On this occasion, we remember the architect of the Canadian Army Hut program, Dr. Claude Brown, Dr. Brown served as Supreme Director from Ontario, and he died 75 years ago as a result of a German air raid on London. Today, our service continues. We assist our troops and veterans with new initiatives. 6 years ago, we pledged $1 million to the Archdiocese for Military Services USA to support the education of desperately needed new Catholic chaplains. Well, we did not just meet that goal, we exceeded it. Led by the Patriotic Degree, we have extended our commitment to a total of $1.4 million. And along with this support for our military chaplains, our Patriotic Degree also awarded 123 college scholarships worth $168,000 through our Pro Deo and Pro Patria program. We've also continued our partnership with the Gary Sinise Foundation, building custom computerized smart homes for severely wounded veterans. Currently, a new smart home is being built for U.S. Army Captain Luis Avila and his wife Claudia, both of whom attended our convention last year. We continue our partnership with the Archdiocese for the Military Services USA in sponsoring our Warriors to Lourdes pilgrimage for active duty American servicemen and veterans. As in years past, this year's Warriors to Lourdes program was held in conjunction with the annual International Military Pilgrimage to Lourdes, which was attended by thousands of Catholic troops from around the world. Each year, this pilgrimage offers our wounded heroes renewal, hope, and healing. In founding the Knights of Columbus, Father McGivney sought to build a brotherhood of men dedicated to the work of charity and to the protection of their families, both spiritually and financially. He personally knew how families had been wounded, especially by the financial consequences of their breadwinner's death. Because of his strong pastoral compassion, Father McGivney was determined to find a concrete, practical response. And this year, we have seen Father McGivney's legacy of shielding Catholic families from financial disaster reach new milestones. This year, our insurance program achieved its 15th consecutive year of growth. We set a record high of $8.4 billion in new sales. And policyholder. This represents nearly 72,000 new life certificates, surpassing the closest fraternal benefit society by more than 25,000. Our 5-year sales growth of nearly 1.6% is above that of the insurance industry as a whole. And last year, our insurance in force grew by more than $4 billion. And in the last 13 years, our insurance in force has more than doubled. Today, we have more than 2 million certificates in force. But our greatest achievement was reaching this milestone this year. We surpassed $100 billion of life insurance in force. This number is the total sum of the face amount of all of our active policies. $100 billion of life insurance in force means an unprecedented level of protection for our Catholic families. We reached this milestone when Donovan Selensky of North Dakota, a member of Council 4136, purchased a life insurance policy for his 1-year-old son, Dyson. Donovan was continuing a Knights of Columbus tradition begun by his father. And when field agent Wayne Cherney sold that policy, his goal was to protect a KFC family so that it would not have to face the hardships he endured when his father died unexpectedly. The Donovan and Tara Selensky family and field agent Cherney and his wife Susan are here with us. And I would ask that they stand to receive our appreciation. Every Knight who buys our top-rated insurance does so through an agent, and every one of our more than 1,500 agents is a Brother Knight. Our success is a testament to three things: the quality of our products, the trust our members have in the Knights of Columbus, and the dedicated Brother Knights who serve as our agents. We strive to have an insurance program that is different. We put people before profits. And this is what we mean when we say insurance by Brother Knights, for Brother Knights. These words are not just a slogan, they are a promise, and it is a promise that makes the Knights of Columbus different. We continue to earn AM Best's highest rating of A++ Superior. This rating is reserved only for a select number of companies that have a superior ability to meet their ongoing insurance operations. And we continue to receive the highest rating available to a U.S.-based insurer from Standard & Poor's. We are also ranked among America's largest companies, ranking number 925 on this year's Fortune 1000 list. Brother Knights who select Knights of Columbus Insurance to protect their families keep their insurance in overwhelming numbers. Our lapse rate is only 3.6%, one of the lowest in the industry and well below the industry average of 8.16%. That means that more than 96% of our insurance members keep their policies. And that, my Brother Knights, is the best evidence of customer satisfaction. In many ways, our success continues to outpace the industry. Our insurance premiums exceeded $1.17 billion. Our annuity deposits were more than $546 million, and we paid more than $280 million in dividends. Of course, one of the best indications of financial strength is how much our assets exceed our liabilities. And by this measure, we are exceptionally strong. Our $1.8 billion surplus provides extraordinary protection. And our record of success highlights another important truth. There is no need to compromise ethics to achieve success in business. For the Knights of Columbus, our ethical commitment and our Catholic values are the foundation of our success. And I am pleased to announce that this year the Knights of Columbus has been named a 2016 World's Most Ethical Company by the Ethisphere Institute. This designation was given to only 131 companies worldwide, companies that foster a culture of ethics. And we have earned that designation for the third consecutive year. So my Brother Knights, I believe you can be proud. You can be proud that the Knights of Columbus is recognized as a world leader in business ethics. The outstanding performance of our insurance agents was matched this year by the strong performance of our investment department. During 2015, we invested more than $11 million every day, and our new investments totaled $2.8 billion. And last year, we earned more than $940 million of investment income. Despite continued difficult market conditions, we found ways to make sure that your money did well while doing good. We only invest in ways consistent with our Catholic values. And thanks to this strategy and our excellent investment team, despite the low interest rate environment, we found quality and sustainable ways to maintain healthy yields. So for example, while the yield on the 10-year Treasury bond averaged 2.1% last year, our new purchase rate was almost twice as high at 4% in the United States and 3.8% in total. The success and expertise of our investment team many of whom are long-term employees, led to our decision to launch Knights of Columbus Asset Advisors. This service offers faith-based investment solutions that are specifically designed to meet the investment needs of Catholic institutions. And it offers those institutions the same expertise and the same strategies and the same ethics that have proved so successful for the Knights of Columbus. Knights of Columbus Asset Advisors is in its 17th month of operation and already has 50 clients, including dioceses, religious orders, and state and local councils, and all now benefit from investment strategies consistent with Catholic principles. We are already listed among the top 200 asset managers in the United States. To the greatest extent possible, we want our investments to make a difference. And there is no better investment, in our view, than the Catholic Church. And one way we make this investment is through our church loan program. This program enables our churches and our schools to finance construction projects at very competitive rates. And at the end of 2015, our portfolio of church loan mortgages totaled approximately $100 million, money that works directly to build up our church. Pope Benedict XVI observed, "It is becoming increasingly obvious that the development of economic systems which concentrate on the common good depend on an ethical system, which in turn can be sustained only by strong religious convictions." At the Knights of Columbus, we make these words a reality. This is the reason why we say we don't run a business. We engage in a Catholic enterprise. During his visit to the United States, Pope Francis addressed Congress. The Holy Father said, "It is important that today, as in the past, the voice of faith continues to be heard, for it is a voice of fraternity and love, which tries to bring out the best in each person and in each society." For nearly 135 years, the Knights of Columbus has been just such a voice of fraternity and of love. And throughout the Holy Father's visit, the Knights of Columbus showed our solidarity with him. More than 1,000 knights served as volunteers at papal events. We provided an honor guard for the Mass at the Basilica of the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception of Washington, D.C. At that Mass, Pope Francis canonized Father Junipero Serra, the great 18th century California missionary. And at the Mass, we helped to honor this great missionary by distributing 30,000 copies of a booklet on his contribution to the history of the United States. At New York's Madison Square Garden, knights served as ushers. And in Philadelphia, the Knights of Columbus emblem was seen everywhere, including on backpacks given to each participant at the World Meeting of Families. The Knights of Columbus was a major financial sponsor of the closing papal Mass. We printed 350,000 copies of the Mass booklet and provided 350 volunteers. The sanctuary and altar for that Mass were designed by James Lenahan, a member of Council 2782 in Illinois. Compositions, which included original music by Brother Knight Peter Latona of Council 433, were performed at the Philadelphia and D.C. papal Masses. And during the Festival of Families, past Grand Knight Rudy Gonzalez of Council 14622 in New York and his family presented their testimony to the Pope. During the World Meeting of Families, Pope Francis called for a new alliance between the church and families. And with our domestic programs, no Catholic organization is better positioned than the Knights of Columbus to answer that call in thousands of parishes. In December, Archbishop Lori and I had the honor of a private audience with Pope Francis. At that time, we discussed with him our programs to support family life and heard him encourage us to continue such practical initiatives. During our meeting with him, we presented him with a contribution of $1.6 million from our Vicarious Christi Fund. And since 1981, our fund has generated more than $56 million for the Pope's charities. In February, Pope Francis visited Mexico, where more than 200 knights from Mexico Northwest served as volunteers at the papal events in Ciudad Juarez, while knights from Mexico South assisted with the Pope's open-air Mass there. I joined the Mexican state deputies attending the Mass that Pope Francis celebrated at the Basilica of Our Lady of Guadalupe in Mexico City, where, prior to the Mass, our documentaries on Our Lady of Guadalupe and on Pope Francis were shown. The Knights of Columbus Board of Directors pilgrimage to the Basilica of Our Lady of Guadalupe coincided with the Pope's visit to Mexico. At that time, we reconsecrated the Knights of Columbus to Our Lady of Guadalupe, and our board's pilgrimage concluded with a solemn Mass celebrated by Cardinal Norberto Rivera Carrera. And after the Mass, we presented the Order's Caritas Award to the rector of the Basilica of Our Lady of Guadalupe, Monsignor Enrique Glene. In January, the Philippines hosted the 51st International Eucharistic Congress in Cebu City. Hundreds of knights served as delegates and were key figures in many of the activities. The Supreme Council was a major financial sponsor. We funded the satellite uplink to broadcast the proceedings worldwide and the publication of a daily newspaper and other materials for the participants. And as we assisted the visits of Pope Francis to the United States and Mexico and Poland, we also paid tribute to the predecessor he canonized, St. John Paul II. St. John Paul II's impact on the Church, the world, and the Knights of Columbus was profound. And earlier this year, we assisted in the development and release of a new documentary entitled Liberating a Continent, John Paul II and the Fall of Communism. This film premiered on public television and was distributed nationally by PBS. The St. John Paul II National Shrine in Washington, D.C., which is a landmark initiative of the Knights of Columbus, is home to a world-class exhibit on the life of John Paul II, a saint who held fast to faith, hope, and love through the darkest moments of the 20th century. And last October, Pope John Paul II's personal secretary, Cardinal Stanislav Dziwisz, now Archbishop of Krakow, came to Washington to dedicate the altar of the shrine's Redemptor Hominis Church, together with Cardinal Donald Wuerl, Archbishop of Washington. The altar in the shrine's Luminous Mysteries Chapel was dedicated by our Supreme Chaplain, Archbishop Lori, on April 2nd, the 11th anniversary of St. John Paul II's death. This beautiful chapel is also home to a first-class relic of St. John Paul II's blood. Both altars are the work of the noted Italian sculptor Eduardo Ferrari, and Jesuit Father Marco Rupnik designed the mosaics featured in both the shrine's main church and the chapel. And while we celebrate the life and legacy of this great saint, we also continue to pray for the canonization of our own founder, the Venerable Father Michael J. McGivney. His cause for canonization is active at the Vatican, and I ask all of you to continue asking for Father McGivney's intercession and to report any possible miracles or favors received to the Father McGivney Guild. And as we pray for the canonization of our founder, we also continue our support for the formation of his successors, the next generation of parish priests. Our Father Michael McGivney and Bishop Thomas Daly scholarship programs provided 144 scholarships to seminarians last year, and each scholarship provides $2,500. Since these two scholarship programs began in 1992 and 1999, they have distributed nearly $7 million to 1,196 seminarians. Our Refund Support Vocations program remains our flagship initiative in supporting vocations. Last year, 2,942 local units provided nearly $3.7 million to 6,180 seminarians. And since 1981, this program has provided more than $67 million to over 110,000 men and women pursuing religious vocations. We continue our strong support of our church and our parish priests. Last year, we donated nearly $48 million to the church, of which more than $19 million went to parishes. $6.6 million went to Catholic schools. Nearly $7 million went to seminarians, and nearly $2 million went directly to seminaries. We also continue our support of quality Catholic journalism. In March, we entered into a partnership with Crux, an important source of news on Catholic issues. We also made a $750,000 donation to help build a new headquarters and studio here in Toronto for Canada's Salt and Light Television. And I'd like to thank Salt and Light Television, and especially its founder, Father Thomas Rosica, for bringing quality Catholic broadcasting to Canada. In addition, we continued our strong financial support of EWTN. Earlier this year, we were saddened, deeply saddened at the passing of EWTN's founder, Mother Angelica. I was honored to know and to have the opportunity to assist Mother Angelica since the early days of EWTN. She transformed the world of Catholic broadcasting, and she brought the light of the gospel to generations of Catholics around the world. Truly, she was one of the great missionaries of the electronic age. The 49th chapter of Isaiah, from which this year's convention theme is drawn, begins with these words. Before birth, the Lord called me. From my mother's womb, he gave me my name. These words reveal to us a profound truth. The child in the womb is a real, living person. And this is the same truth that our ultrasound initiative reveals to thousands of mothers. The Spanish language phrase that means to give birth is dar a luz, words that literally mean to give light to the child. Our ultrasound program gives a light to the mother that enables her to see the reality and even the personality of her child in the womb. And I am proud to announce that last month we donated our 700th ultrasound machine. Jurisdictions leading this effort are Florida, with 54 machines, Texas with 47, California with 46, Missouri with 40, and Michigan with 37. Iowa now has a statewide initiative through ultrasound machines and new pregnancy centers. They intend to reduce abortions in Iowa by 50% by the year 2020. In Florida, Knights have recently raised $75,000 for 5 ultrasound machines. The British Columbia and New Brunswick State Councils both raised matching funds for ultrasound machines. British Columbia Knights raised $21,500 for a machine in Abbotsford, and New Brunswick Knights raised $20,000 for the Women's Care Center in Fredericton. We continue our support and our partnership in building a culture of life with the Sisters of Life, and we are especially encouraged by their success of their visitation mission here in Toronto, and we celebrate with them their 25th anniversary this year. Today, an overwhelming majority of Americans support restrictions on abortion. They say abortion is morally wrong and they are against taxpayer funding of abortion. About 8 in 10 Americans would significantly restrict abortion, according to a survey we commissioned from the Marist poll. A majority would restrict abortion to only the rarest of circumstances, and almost 6 in 10 Canadians want substantial restrictions on abortion. By a wide margin, a majority of Americans say that professionals and organizations should not be forced to provide abortion when they have moral objections. And strong majorities disagree with the reasoning of this summer's U.S. Supreme Court decision on abortion. 7 in 10 Americans think these doctors should be required to have admitting privileges at local hospitals. And they want these clinics held to the same standards as other outpatient surgery centers. We continue to support the cause of life around the world, from Poland to the Philippines. Knights are among the most visible participants in the annual March for Life from Washington, D.C., and in marches in San Francisco and Los Angeles, and in the March for Life in Ontario, and pro-life marches in the Philippines, Mexico, and Poland. Our pro-life witness is demonstrated in many ways. In Council 14721 in Mexico Central, that council erected a statue of Our Lady of Guadalupe holding a newborn child as a celebration of life, and the council financially supports the local Pregnancy Resource Center. My brother Knights, we are changing hearts and minds. We are making a difference. And every time we save a life, we change history. This is why the Knights of Columbus will always be at the forefront of the pro-life cause from the moment of conception until natural death. But sadly, abortion is not the only threat to innocent human life. Increasingly, the end of life is also under assault in Canada and in the United States. Besides being morally wrong, assisted suicide laws have been abused in countries where they have been enacted. People understand this, and not surprisingly, strong majorities of Americans are deeply concerned about the consequences of laws to legalize assisted suicide. By almost 2 to 1, Canadians think that doctors should not have to violate their conscience when it comes to referring someone to assisted suicide. My brother Knights, in 1882, widows and orphans were on the margins of society. But today, it is the unborn and those at the end of life. That is why now, as of Columbus embraces those who are being ignored by being a light to the nations begins with being a light to our own nation. We do this by being faithful Catholic citizens. Canada has provided many outstanding examples of faithful citizenship. We think of the former Prime Minister of Canada, Louis Saint Laurent, our former Deputy Supreme Knight and currently Canada's Ambassador to the Holy See, Denis Savoy, and our current Supreme Director and former Lieutenant Governor of New Brunswick, Graydon Nicholas, who last month was awarded the Order of Canada. Another excellent example of faithful citizenship is Brother Paul Comtois. He was the Lieutenant Governor of Quebec, who passed to his eternal reward 50 years ago. Comtois was such a devoted Catholic that he had a small chapel in his home and had repeatedly asked his Archbishop if the Blessed Sacrament could be reserved there. Finally, the Archbishop relented, but only under one condition. Comtois would be personally responsible for its care. When his house caught fire one evening, Comtois brought his family out safely. Then he went back into the burning building, but he did not come out a second time. When they turned over his charred body, the firefighters found safe against his chest the pyx containing the Eucharist he had rescued. Paul Comtois had kept his word. In the United States, we too have had powerful examples of faithful citizenship. And often, those examples come from our women religious. Nearly 100 years ago, the Ku Klux Klan succeeded in banning Catholic schools in the state of Oregon. But Catholic sisters there exercised their faithful citizenship by appealing that law all the way to the Supreme Court. Supported financially by the Knights of Columbus, their victory in the case of Pierce versus Society of Sisters ensured the right to Catholic education throughout the United States. Today, we think of other sisters who have resisted not a state government, but a national government. They were ordered to sign a form that would have triggered contraception, sterilization, and abortifacient coverage in their employees' health plan. But the Little Sisters of the Poor stood firm and appealed their case to the Supreme Court, represented by lawyers from the Becket Fund and supported by the Knights of Columbus. These courageous sisters did not back down. We filed a brief with the Supreme Court on their behalf and helped to fund the attorneys who defended them. Today, the Little Sisters of the Poor are still helping the poor, the sick, and the dying. They are still doing their incredible work in their communities, and they are still doing all of this without violating their conscience. While he was in Washington, Pope Francis visited the Little Sisters to show his solidarity. And later he then wrote this: "Precisely for the sake of this dignity of conscience, the Church strongly rejects the forced state intervention in favor of contraception, sterilization, and even abortion." And today we could apply here the words of Shakespeare from the play Henry V, to say that there are other gentlemen who, when the courage of the Little Sisters is remembered, will hold their manhoods cheap that they refuse to stand with the Little Sisters. My brother Knights, we are so proud of the Little Sisters of the Poor that this evening at our States Dinner, we will award them the Knights of Columbus' highest recognition, our Gaudium et Spes Award. Pope Francis has emphasized how important it is for Catholics to be engaged in the political process. His words regarding the importance of Catholics being faithful citizens are especially important for us. He said this: "Politics, according to the social doctrine of the Church, is one of the highest forms of charity because it serves the common good." He also stated, "We have to do our best by participating in politics according to our ability." Now, this does not mean partisanship, nor does it mean that we should be party men. But it does mean that we should stand for the common good and for those moral and religious values that make possible our free and democratic institutions. And foremost among these is the equal dignity of every human life and the right of every person to freely practice their religion. And I know I speak for every brother knight when I pay tribute to our Supreme Chaplain, Archbishop Lori, who is a courageous, steadfast champion of religious freedom. Eight years ago, our Supreme Convention met in the city of Quebec, and I feel called today, as a matter of conscience, to repeat what I said to the delegates at that time. I said this: "Once again, we meet during a presidential election campaign in the United States. And once again, the question confronts us: how should Catholics exercise their responsibilities as citizens? Catholics often confront a dilemma in deciding how to vote. Can we support a candidate who may be attractive for many reasons, but who supports abortion? Some partisan advocates have sought to excuse support for pro-abortion candidates through a complex balancing act. They claim other issues are important enough to offset a candidate's support for abortion. But the right to abortion is not just another political issue. It is in reality a legal regime that has resulted in the death of more than 40 million people. Imagine for a moment the largest 25 cities in the United States and Canada, including New York, Los Angeles, Toronto, Montreal, Chicago, Houston, Philadelphia, Dallas, and Vancouver. All of these cities suddenly empty of people. This is what the loss of 40 million human beings would look like. In fact, 40 million is greater than the entire population of Canada. What political issue could possibly outweigh this human devastation? The answer, of course, is that there is none. Abortion is different. Abortion is the killing of the innocent on a massive scale. And we need to end the political manipulation of Catholic voters by abortion advocates. It is time to end the entanglement of Catholic people, with abortion killing. It is time to stop creating excuses for voting for pro-abortion politicians. We will never succeed in building a culture of life if we continue to vote for politicians who support a culture of death. Catholic voters have the power to transform our politics. Faithful Catholics can build a new politics that is not satisfied with the status quo, but one that is dedicated to building up a new culture of life. If we truly hope for a culture of life and a civilization of love, then we must first think and then we must act in new ways. That is what I said 8 years ago, and I believe these words are as relevant today as they were then. But today I would add this. We must also think in new ways if we are to build up a civilization of love. Last year, during our Supreme Convention in Philadelphia, I spoke about the racial murders that occurred in an African American church in Charleston, South Carolina. And at that time I said, our nation owes these courageous Christians a debt of gratitude for showing us a noble path. Tragically, since that time, racial violence has continued in the United States. Just weeks ago, the Knights of Columbus urged Catholics and others to join us in 9 days of prayer for national healing and reconciliation. And this, too, is a most important demonstration of faithful citizenship, that in times of national tragedy, we refuse to let the worst among us define who we are as a people. Faithful citizenship means that in times of tragedy, we raise a standard of charity, of unity, and of fraternity that can make possible forgiveness, healing, and reconciliation. Faithful citizenship calls us to follow the better angels of our nature to build a better society. But to build a better society, we must have the freedom to follow those angels. Pope Francis has warned that the encroachment on religious freedom in the West is a polite persecution. This, he said, takes away from men and women their freedom as well as their right to conscientious objection. And more recently, he called for governments to have a solid law guaranteeing religious freedom. And he said people must be free to profess their religion at the heart of their own culture, not merely at its margins. And at the same time, the Pope has spoken about violent and deadly persecution, saying this: Christians around the world are suffering the greatest part of this discrimination. The persecution of Christians today is even greater, the Pope said, than in the first centuries of Christianity. And there are more Christian martyrs today than in that era. This summer, the Pew Forum reported that Christians are the most persecuted group in the world. Christians are the most persecuted group in the world, with persecution occurring in 108 countries. Today, this persecution is seen most clearly in the Middle East. Christians there have been tortured, murdered, enslaved, and driven into exile. Many in the West wanted to look away, but we would not let them. Last year when we met, I pledged that the Knights of Columbus would lead an educational effort to expose the crimes against humanity that are being committed, especially against Christians. I said, it is time for a season of truth about what is happening to Christians and other minorities. And as a result of the determined and courageous work of so many Brother Knights and others who have joined with us, we have had that season of truth. And the result? The American government finally called the martyrdom of these Christians by its proper legal name: genocide. We were told by many that such a declaration was simply impossible. But we persisted, working with members of Congress and the State Department and unleashing a powerful public awareness campaign that included this commercial on major television networks.
It's not a partisan issue. John Kasich, Ted Cruz, and Marco Rubio have declared it genocide. Hillary Clinton has too. A majority of the American people agree. This is what Christians and other religious minorities are facing at the hands of ISIS in the Middle East. But the State Department still hasn't labeled this extermination what it is. It's time for action. Sign the petition at stopthechristiangenocide.org.
Our team did an enormous amount of research, assisted by many members of the region's hierarchy. We sent one of our own staff to Iraq to collect firsthand evidence. And within a month, we had produced a nearly 300-page report that documented conclusively that the genocide perpetrated by ISIS against Christians is a reality. The Knights of Columbus was credited by people from the Speaker of the House of Representatives to senior officials at the State Department for being decisive in this successful effort. On March 14th, the House of Representatives moved first, declaring by a vote of 393 to 0 that Christians and other religious minorities had been targeted for genocide. 3 days later, Secretary of State John Kerry formally declared that what is happening to Christians is genocide. And on July 7th, the Senate acted. My brother Knights, we made history. However, this is only just the beginning. As I said in congressional testimony and at the United Nations, Christians in the Middle East deserve equal rights, not second-class citizenship. Governments and the United Nations should use all of their leverage to ensure that Christians get fundamental human rights. These rights include not only the freedom of religion, but also freedom of speech and equal protection of the law. These rights are guaranteed in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and they should no longer be denied Christians in the Middle East. The denial of equal rights to Christians is the breeding ground of genocide, and it must end. Governments and the United Nations should act to ensure that these fragile indigenous communities survive. Canada has asked the UN Security Council to investigate the horrific crimes of ISIS, and we applaud this effort. But the United States government has spoken with one voice on the matter of the genocide of Christians. So has the European Parliament and governments and officials around the world. Of those who take a position on the matter here, by more than 2 to 1, a majority of Canadians say what is happening to Christians in the Middle East is genocide. So we say now is the time for the True North, strong and free, to add its voice to this clear consensus that what is happening to Christians is genocide. In the days ahead, we will continue our work to ensure that the Christians who still speak the language of Jesus and whose ancestors baptized St. Paul will survive. Recently, when speaking about the vocation of the laity, Pope Francis recalled that following the Second Vatican Council, it was popular to say, "The hour of the laity has come." But then the Pope went on to say, "But now it seems that the clock has stopped." He continued by saying that the laity is called to boldly bring the good news of the gospel to all areas of society. But some might ask, how are we to do that in the light of the Second Vatican Council. At the conclusion of the Second Vatican Council, Pope Paul VI answered this very question. He said that the work of the Council should be understood as a great confrontation, a confrontation between what he described as the religion of the God who became man and the religion of man who makes himself God. He said that in this confrontation, the Council could have chosen to issue a great condemnation, but it did not. Instead, he said it did something entirely different. Pope Paul VI said that charity has been the principal religious feature of this council. And he went on to say that the Second Vatican Council intended to offer to the world what he described as the Church of the Good Samaritan. And we are all familiar with the parable of the Good Samaritan. And our Lord's question still echoes to us through the ages. Which of the three was the neighbor to the robber's victim? And so does the reply, the one who showed him mercy. My brother Knights, we are coming to the end of the Holy Year of Mercy. But for us as Knights of Columbus, this year should not only be the end, but it should be the end of a beginning. The beginning of a life of greater mercy in our families, in our councils, in our communities, and in our nations. Although much has been written about mercy during this year, I will tell you this. There can be no mercy without charity. There can be no mercy without unity. There can be no mercy without fraternal brotherhood. In short, there can be no mercy without love of neighbor and the concrete acts of charity that express that love. In our day, this is the prophetic flame that the laity is called to hold high as a light to the nations. And this reality places a special responsibility upon the Knights of Columbus. In thousands of ways, every day, the Church of the Good Samaritan lives and grows through the works of charity that are the hallmark of the Knights of Columbus. And all of this is the legacy of our founder, the Venerable Father Michael McGivney, whose spiritual genius inspired generations of Catholic men to step forward with courage to confront the challenges of their day by living out the principles of charity, unity, and fraternity in a distinctly Catholic way. The prophetic flame of which Pope Francis speaks continues to burn bright in the hearts of our brother Knights around the world. That flame enkindles in them a true sense of Catholic charity, a charity that evangelizes and brings in very concrete ways a light to the nations. Yes, it is the hour of the laity. It is the hour of the Knights of Columbus. Vivat Jesus!
Thank you, worthy Supreme Knight, for your impressive and comprehensive report on the state of our order. We are grateful for your summary of our activities this year, but even more, for the leadership you provide day in and day out. that has enabled our order to thrive and to reach new heights. In this year, as you mark your 15th anniversary of service as Supreme Knight, we renew our deep gratitude and pledge our loyalty to you in your exemplary leadership of our order. The chair now recognizes, for the purpose of making a motion, State Deputy Tim Skahosha of the Supreme Knight's home jurisdiction, the District of Columbia.
Worthy Deputy Supreme Knight, I move that the sincere appreciation and gratitude of the Supreme Council be extended to our Supreme Knight for his address, and that his report be made a part of the minutes of this meeting.
Is there a second? The motion has been made and seconded that the Supreme Knight's report be received and filed. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, my brother knights. I now return the gavel to our worthy Supreme Knight.
Thank you very much. It is now my honor to introduce a very special guest who is joining us for his first Supreme Convention. His Beatitude, Ignatius Joseph III Yunan, Patriarch of the Syriac Catholic Church of Antioch. His Beatitude has been a proud member of the Knights of Columbus for 25 years. Please join me in welcoming him for his remarks to our convention.
You are outstanding. Thank you. Dear brother, cardinals, bishops, priests, dear Knights of Columbus, the report of the Supreme Knight, so rich and outstanding, even enriching all of us, and with my poor English and also with my weak preparation, perhaps, I came last night, I fear that I am not going to keep you awake in this critical time. Albert Einstein said, "The world is a dangerous place to live, not because of the people who are evil, but because of the people who don't do anything about it." This perhaps reminds what Blaise Pascal, the good Catholic French thinker, wrote, "Never are the saints silent." You know that my remarks will treat most particularly the religious freedom in the Middle East. You have, of course, known the Charter of Human Rights, and you live in countries, the United States and Canada, where the law of respecting religious freedom is so-called, it's respected or stipulated. But in our country, it's not like that, or in our region. I am so happy to tell you that this year at the Supreme Knights of Columbus Convention, we are here of the Middle East, bishops and patriarchs, several priests. We have 4 bishops from Iraq, 1 bishop from Syria, 1 bishop from Lebanon, and your servant coming also from Lebanon, although I am a patriarch dealing with my Syriac Catholic community in the whole world. I would like to apologize for my poor English, but most importantly, to excuse me if I get somehow too emotional. This because it's not a thesis of doctorate of the past or what theological, historical analysis, but it's of the ongoing life, tragic life of your brothers and sisters in the Middle East. For years and years, long ago, in Iraq, today, the 1st of August, 1990, it was the invasion of the Iraqi army into Kuwait, and then in the embargo. Since then, so 25 years was in the embargo on Iraq, and Iraqi citizens were suffering the most, and among them, Christian communities as well other minorities. And next Saturday, August the 6th, it will be the 2nd anniversary of kicking out, uprooting our Christian communities altogether, around 140,000 of Christians. They have been kicked out, uprooted from the plains of Nineveh, villages and small cities, as the Supreme Knight just said. And we have almost, if not more than 50% of those uprooted people still living in very dire conditions in Kurdistan, that means north of Iraq, or they have been fleeing to Lebanon, Jordan, Turkey, or crossing seas and oceans to other continents. Because our Christians in Iraq feel abandoned, they keep telling us what's going to happen to us. Will we ever return home? And I tell you the truth, the bishops, the Iraqi bishops who are here, they know I visited Iraq many times since then, and I used to tell them, till now, I'm very sorry. I am very saddened. I have no answer to give you. And this is very tragic for us, because it's not a question of having people persecuted for a while, then they will take kind of rights, or they will be rewarded with the kind of tribunals or some laws. But the morale of our people in Iraq is really getting down, and that goes from bad to worse. In Syria, as you well know, for the past 5.5 years, the crisis began southern Syria, and after around, let's say, 2 years, we kept hearing from officials, either in Europe or America, also of our brothers, the church's leaders. It was a wrong reading of the situation in Syria. And this was a kind of fatal act against Christians in that country. We can say that over 500,000 of Christians have been displaced, mostly inside Syria and outside. and we keep visiting with them where we can, trying to encourage them to stay and to inspire them hope and faith. But believe me, this is not easy. And why? Because also the Christians in Syria, they feel like abandoned, even betrayed by the so-called powerful nations, most particularly in the West. The devastation, killings, kidnappings have spread all over the country, most particularly central Syria, South Syria, northeast and northwest. Now, the best example of that horrendous situation is the second largest city, Aleppo, which is besieged till now for the past 4 years. And when you read or your media here or watch the TV, they will keep telling you that the government is bombing innocent civilians in Aleppo. A sectarian war is the worst. We kept telling the Westerners, those who were interested in that situation in the Middle East, please be careful. We can't speak of Arabic Spring in Syria. Situation in Syria very complex. It's not to be compared to Libya, Tunisia, neither Egypt. It's very complex because in Syria, as well in Iraq, there are several minorities, different of the majority, either by confession, that means by faith, even by race or language. And therefore we have to be very careful, not just pretending exporting the Western democracy into areas, region where they are not able to exercise that notion or that principle of democracy. Why? Because, first of all, they can't separate religion from state. If you have this principle of the Charter or the Declaration of Human Rights not being applied, that means you're going to discriminate against others. And that means if you have to apply the Islam as the religion of a country, that means you're going to discriminate against non-Muslims of whatever confession they are. And thank you. Thank you. What we can do, we often hear from our brother bishops or some civil leaders in the West what we can do. You can do a lot. We have to stand up to apply the principle of religious freedom. You can't be the best ally with regimes, those that discriminate and do not accept or do not grant the religious freedom to non-Muslims, like most of the allies of the West. And this is, we have to say that, with clear voice. It is not honest and sincere to be the allied to such a regime and just saying we have annual report about the religious freedom. What you do to tell those regimes to apply that charter, that declaration of the human rights. We live in the 21st century, not in the 7th century. Some would say that we have more Muslims that were killed at the hands of ISIS. Yes, because they are more than us. They number very much more than us. We are left in Iraq now perhaps less than 1% of the population Christians, and in Syria less than 6%. And we remember that some years ago, let's say the time of Saddam Hussein, Christians were making at least 5%. And in Syria, there was a time in the 50s they were 19%. And so we're going to go even to the Holy Land to look at the dwindling of the Christians in the Holy Land. You go there and you do your best, and we thank you for pilgrimage there, but most of the time you will go and visit in shrines or churches, monasteries, and the Christian population no more exist. And this did happen in other countries, like now in Iraq, where plenty of churches have been abandoned and destroyed, likewise monasteries, and in Syria, only in Syria, we have at least 140 churches. They have been destroyed by the so-called Daesh or ISIS, or by the sectarian war between the two parties. They fight each other. But most of the time by those, I have been 2 months ago to Palmyra, and I saw what kind of destroyed city was. But here for the West, the question of the, let's say, the old city, that the archaeological ones, what did happen with it? But they don't think about hundreds of thousands being forced into exile and many thousand killed. In nearby Qaryatain, we have been also attacked. All Christians, around 300 people were kidnapped. Then, little by little, we could liberate them. The priest of the monastery of Saint Ilian, who did open his monastery convent to everyone, mostly to Muslims, he has been kidnapped for 4 months. And his convent, as well, the parish church, parish, let's say, foyer, all destroyed. So what we can tell our people, stand up and live up to your faith. It's not a matter of persecuting one person as individual or a group of persons. My friends, the very existence of Eastern churches, those churches, they are from the apostolic time, is at stake, in danger. The survival not going to be ensured if we have this, what we call hypocritical, geopolitical, Machiavellian agenda of the powerful nations or countries or politicians of the West. Since the religious freedom in the Middle East is very linked to our relations with Islamic religion, we have also to say clearly that we Christians in the Middle East in the 21st century, we don't understand how can we close our eyes face to political parties based on Islam. If you go and open the side of the Muslim Brotherhood, Ikhwan al-Muslimin. What's the motto of that political Islamic party? It was founded 1928 in Egypt. Allah is our objective. The Prophet is our leader. The Quran is our law. Jihad is our way, and dying for God is our ultimate desire. Sounds good. We Christians also are prepared to shed our blood for Christ. Yes, we have been like that, especially in the East. Our forefathers, they did stand all kind of persecution until now. But here, what that means, jihad. And what did happen in the last years, either in the Middle East or in this state, United States, or in Ottawa, Canada, or in Europe, and lately at that small village of Saint-Étienne or Vouvray, and the slaughter of that old priest. It's really, we have to ask ourselves, are we honest to separate religion from state? Who did teach those two young men? They did slaughter Father Jacques Hamel, other than those sheikh imams. They did kind of alienate those children and youth and told them to memorize all verses of the Quran. In the Quran, we have verses that inspire tolerance. This is true. But also we have verses that instigate for violence. And if you tell those kids that all those verses are coming from God, literally, it's the word of God. That means you will be able to change that young man into a beast. Because, as I said, you have violent verses. And since they don't have exegesis, and they have to memorize those verses, so it's not going to be easy to prevent them not being killer or terrorist. Dear friends, I am here not to plead for humanitarian assistance. You have done a lot, as the Supreme Knight said, and gave you the relation about the amount spent to help our Christian refugees, either in their own country like Iraq, Syria, or those countries they fled to, or those who came into the Western countries. What we need most is to stand up and defend our religious freedom and our civil rights. The Western countries, along with the Russian Federation, along with China, with Brazil, and the United Nations, they can do this. They have to tell those countries where there is no separation between religion and state except in Lebanon, that it's no more acceptable that you link religion to the public life of the citizens. And when I say that, because they register in the civil book the religion of a citizen. That means they are discriminating all the time. If a young Christian man would marry a Muslim girl in all Arab countries except Lebanon, he has to change into Islam. And not just saying that, yes, I am following my sweetheart, I will accept. He has to register as Muslim, and their children, they have to be registered as Muslims. And we have this problem till now. We can't find a solution because nobody will help us. Nobody will tell those regimes it's no more acceptable. And if we continue like that, not only because of the war, but because the morale is getting lost, that means is dwindling, especially among our young people. And that means it will be time, soon time, Syria, Iraq, even Lebanon, where it is a lot of tension because of the surrounding spot of violence, will be like Turkey, where there is no more than 1 out of 1,000 Christians in that land, where we have been we have known a lot of ecumenical councils and many fathers of the church and the flourishing of Christianity. St. Paul and other apostles did preach the gospel. Now we can speak of Christian existence in that big, huge country, Turkey, and it's getting worse. Now, I would ask for your pardon because perhaps I talk too much, but it comes from my heart. I would like to thank you again, Supreme Knight, your assistants, and my brother cardinals, bishops, who have opened their heart to invite us and to try to find a way to help us in our tragic situation, and especially to help us resist the temptation of leaving the land of our forefathers. It will be a great loss, not only for us, not only for the Middle Eastern region, but for the whole universal church. Thank you very much.
Beatitude, thank you very much. Last year at our convention, I promised our delegates that we would work to ensure a season of truth about what is happening to Christians in your region. Thank you for adding your voice to this effort. The world was horrified last March by the brutal murder of the 4 missionaries of charity in Yemen and the kidnapping of Father Thomas Hussein. Once again, the world was shocked last week by the cold-blooded murder in France of Father Jacques Hamel while celebrating the holy sacrifice of the Mass. So now I ask everyone that we observe a moment of silence and prayer for these martyrs of our faith and victims of religious hatred. And now please join the Patriarch and me in prayer for these and the thousands yet unknown to the world who have given their lives in witness to the faith.
We fly to thy protection, O Holy Mother of God. Despise not our petitions in our necessities, but deliver us always from all dangers, O glorious and blessed Virgin. Amen. Thank you, God. Bless you.
As we conclude our live coverage of the Knights of Columbus 134th Supreme Convention, I wish to thank all of those who have joined this opening session by means of the Eternal Word Television Network, Salt and Light Television, and Catholic TV. Now, before calling on our Supreme Secretary for his report, the Chair recognizes State Deputy Alain Caillé of Ontario.
And we are back here on set for the 134th Supreme Convention from Toronto. As you saw, the opening session highlighted by remarks by the Supreme Knight himself, Carl Anderson. I'm Doug Keck, and joining me on set here is Sarah Dubroy. She's our EWTN Regional Marketing Manager for Canada. Welcome, Sarah. It's good to have maybe somebody a little uplifting. We heard some pretty interesting talks there from the opening session.
Thank you for having me.
That's great. Now, EWTN has actually been in Canada since, around 2002, and you're our marketing manager. You're originally out of Ottawa, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And some people might be familiar with seeing you with our pro-life coverage out of Ottawa on a regular basis, the March for Life, basically in Canada, and you've been involved with that for several years too, right?
That's correct.
Right. Now, the Knights of Columbus are very much interested in the whole culture of life. In fact, there's a whole section that Carl Anderson talked about in the session that was in his talk. And why is the culture of life and pro-life so important to you?
It's important to get the message out that women shouldn't be having abortions and that life begins at conception and everyone is a child of God and everyone has the right to be born.
Now, EWTN, a lot of people don't realize there is a specific Canadian channel, it's called Salt and Light up here, but we launched in 2002, and I guess we're in about 75% of the possible homes were available. And what are some information you can give us to people who might be watching and are unaware of our distribution and our availability in Canada?
Well, those are just the stats for television. We're also available on Sirius XM satellite radio on channel 130 on the internet, and we have a free mobile app so people can watch us on their phones, and we're also available on Roku, so that streams from our mobile app as well.
We've actually shot some series and done some programs up in Canada here on a regular basis. Kevin Dunn here locally has worked with us, of course, on the March for Life coverage from Ottawa, also some other programs on Jean Vanier. We did a on-location kind of small family celebration a couple of years back in Vancouver. And we're looking hopefully to do something maybe on the East Coast sometime next year. We're waiting to find out, so people can look forward to that. Now, if somebody was watching here and wants to be involved with EWTN and spreading the word, we also have the Media Missionaries. You're working on that. And I think of the grassroots efforts of the Knights of Columbus dovetailing perfectly in with the Media Missionaries.
Yeah, we need our viewers to help raise awareness of EWTN by volunteering as a media missionary. They can sign up online at EWTNmissionaries.com, and they can always contact me directly if viewers in Canada want to get involved. My email address is Escobar. I just got married.
Okay, congratulations.
Thank you, at EWTN.com.
Right.
So.
And you had a chance to go see our Holy Father, right? You and your husband in your wedding garb there, and got to meet him, right?
Yes.
So that must have been quite exciting.
It was, yes.
Right. And you two met actually a World Youth Day trip to Australia, right?
That's correct.
Okay. So you've got a whole connection here. What's also interesting, too, in talking to Sarah was the idea, your dad, how did you kind of got involved with journalism, you got involved with the diocese, and you said, and when I asked you, why did you decide to go into Catholic media, you talked about your dad.
Yeah, my dad was always my role model. He started Ottawa's first Christian radio station in 1997, so that was one of the first Canadian Christian radio stations.
And how are you seeing, you're getting out to more and more events, that's part of what we wanted to do with them, and are you seeing an interest, whether it be in EWTN or just in Catholics connecting to their faith?
Yeah, people's faith is getting deeper from watching our programming, and also people have come back to the church from watching EWTN. Especially popular is the Journey Home because people enjoy watching those testimonies, those deep conversions to Catholic
Marcus
faith.
is very proud of his French-Canadian roots, which you'll talk about many times. We actually shot some Journey Homes up here in Canada as well. Just to remind people, this is the 134th annual convention for the Knights of Columbus, coming to you live from Toronto, Canada. I'm Doug Keck, and this is Sarah Dubroy, now Escobar, recently married, who's our marketing rep up here in Canada for our Canadian channel, which we launched back in 2002. We're waiting on some interviews coming up. We look for Carl Anderson will be here, and hopefully also the chaplain, Archbishop Laurie from Baltimore, and possibly even his beatitude as well, who's had that powerful talk he gave just moments ago, and we're looking forward to that coming up shortly. So when we're reaching out to people in Canada, what is it you want them to know about what EWTN has to offer for Catholics who might be looking for additional support in living out their day-to-day life, like we like to say sometimes, from Sunday to Sunday?
I find At Home with Jim and Joy is for your average family that wants to learn more about other people who try to live out the faith in the family.
Right, and of course Jim and Joy have been up here anchoring the coverage for the pro-life events happening in Ottawa. Have you seen from having that televised, the numbers expand and the number of people who are aware that there is a pro-life movement in Canada that they might not have been aware of before, and there are events that they can participate in?
It definitely does raise the awareness across the country and across the U.S. as well.
Right. Now, when you're going to particular events, what is it you try to convey to people about EWTN and about their Catholic faith that you found important in your own life?
We have to share our faith. It's not meant to be kept by ourselves or else it dies. So becoming a media missionary, getting involved, sharing the good news through the media is a way to reach people that you might not be able to reach face-to-face.
Right. And what's the reaction been up here? Obviously, you recently have had some legislation having to do with basically euthanasia and things like that. How has that been reacted to by the Catholic faithful?
The dioceses aren't happy with what's happening at the federal level right now, but we're trying to get together and push against it.
Right, and I think it's important for us all to realize that we're all up against it, whether it's happening in Canada or other parts of the world, in the United States certainly as well, and that we all have to band together. And one of the things, obviously, is prayer is a very, very important part of what we ask people to do when we're taking on things like this, right?
Right.
Exactly. Now, as far as Canada, one of the things that's interesting with Carl Anderson, he talked about martyrs, and he talks about the Canadian martyrs, and people to realize, really we talk about the North American martyrs because that's the American way of kind of making everything amorphous, but they're really Canadian martyrs.
They are.
And they really stood up for the faith many, many years ago when the French missionaries and the Jesuits came over. And how do you feel thinking today about the talks we just heard earlier about the idea that we're really dealing with martyrs today as well, just like they were in Canada so many years ago?
And all over the world now.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you so much, Sarah. We're going to take a break in a minute here while we wait for Carl Anderson to make his way over here. Don't forget, we have the States Dinner that's coming up later tonight, so you can look forward to that. We also have some wonderful programs on related to the Knights of Columbus that will be coming your way later as well. And we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, hopefully we'll be with Carl Anderson, Supreme Knight, and give us some insights into his address to the membership. Again, stay with us. This is the 134th Annual Knights of Columbus Convention coming to you live from Toronto, Canada. Stay with us.
Being in college, I wanted to have a group of guys that share my same interests and help me become the man that I want to be. Knights of Columbus is a brotherhood of Catholic men who want to practice their faith, share it with others, and do charity or events for the church and for the community.
We are in the Chapel of Christ the King, which is the campus church at King's College in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. We gathered in the presence of relics of the Passion in a very kind of meditative, prayerful way to kind of reflect on the tremendous mercy of the Lord.
It was one of those once-in-a-lifetime opportunities, I think, for us as Knights and for the people in the crowd to come see.
I joined the Knights of Columbus because when I came to King's, I was looking for a reason to get involved in faith and service. And when I heard about the Knights of Columbus, I realized that this is my perfect opportunity to get involved and to make service more of a dedication in my life.
The Knights here are involved in Right to Life movements. They're involved in prayer moments for our community. And they also get together for fraternity among themselves, which is a really important part.
Coming into college, you're like, do I really want to go to church? Are my friends going to go to church? And it's just nice to see there's a group of guys that we can go out and hang out and do normal college kid stuff, but we can also come to church together and do these service projects together and really reinforce our faith together.
It's important to be visible on campus to show what we stand for. We do a lot together. We go to Mass, we do service projects. So you really learn to have a bond with your brothers. They become your brothers.
We try to do like an event here every month that will raise awareness of the Catholic faith. Basically to say that we're actually college kids, normal college kids that want to help out our community.
So we're out here for the Knights of Columbus Council 10624 first annual BCS Field Fest. Council 10624 is a collegiate council within the Knights of Columbus.
We wanted to have a fun event for the community to come out. We are just going to be having some games for competition between kids and adults and a good barbecue meal. And eventually we'll be having some knockerball as well.
A very big part of what we're hoping to do is definitely getting our name out there, making sure that we're recognized as a helpful, uplifting force in this community.
The Knights are called to help build up the communities we're in. We each need to do our own part. It's time to get out, get our boots muddy, and the Knights afford me that opportunity.
People want to be part of something that's good, that's recognizable. By doing these type of events, by being visible in the community, they see what we've got going on, they see it's successful, they say, hey, I'm Catholic, hey, I'm a guy that can get involved with us.
It's not just a relationship between me and God, it's a relationship between me and God and God's people. The Knights of Columbus have really helped me emphasize that and strengthen that aspect. Every man needs that fraternal community, and if I didn't have the Knights, I don't know where I would have found it.
When I was in high school, that's the place where this dream that I had of being a professional athlete, specifically a professional soccer player, became a goal. When I went to college and I was playing on one of the top programs in the country, I befriended another coach who was from Chile. He told me that he thought that I had the ability to play in the South American style, that he could even open the doors for me there because he knew the game there. So he did. When I graduated from college, just 2 months later, I traveled for the first time to Chile and had a tryout. I had to earn my spot, and I had to earn respect, and I had to show that I actually could play, which made it all the more worthwhile. It made it all the more worth it when I actually earned my starting job with a first division team called Huachipato. When I moved, a huge culture shock. My friends changed. My family was no longer there. And here I am practicing for 2 hours a day and sitting for 22 hours in my own house. I had a lot of downtime and a lot of time to think about where my life was going. And all of these questions started to come and started crashing in my heart. I started to ask, who am I? Why am I here? Why was I chosen to play here? And do I believe the things that I profess that I believe on a weekly basis? I was sitting in an ice-cold chapel in the middle of the Chilean winter, which is a terrible rainy season. And I sat there before the tabernacle, and I remember it was one day that I was just truly praying for comfort. I didn't feel a great level of comfort. I didn't feel great. And I went there to be a professional athlete, to be great. My heroes were professional athletes. I thought greatness was everything that I saw other professional athletes being. And so seeing them excel at their sport, that was greatness to me. That's what it was to be a great man. To be respected by others, to be known by others was to be great. To make money was to be great. To have a beautiful woman by your side, that's what it was to be great. And I didn't feel that I was living greatness. Mix that with the loneliness and the culture shock. I was before the Blessed Sacrament in this chapel, knowing that Jesus was present there. And I was just praying for comfort. Lord, bring comfort into my life. Bring me all the things that I believe to be great. Make that happen for me. And it was right there, in the silence of that chapel and in the silence of my heart, the loudest voice that I have ever heard that's never audibly spoken. And at that moment, I heard, "Be my priest." And that shocked me like you wouldn't believe, because it wasn't anything that I was thinking about. I immediately rejected that thought and that idea. And it was not something that I was willing to live. And it wasn't something that I was willing to do for him. I continued to live my life as a professional athlete, and things actually went very well for me. I began to experience greatness in my definition on the field. I began to experience greatness in every aspect of my life. I had a lot of friends. I was becoming well known. I had a great girlfriend, and even being named the best player in my position in the league that year. I remember sitting up in my bed at night, not being able to sleep, and recognizing, I don't know that it can get any better than this. And right there, in a split second, I recognized that I had nothing else planned for my life. I recognized that there was maybe nothing greater that I could do. And it was at that very moment this call to priesthood was heavily on my heart. And I realized that if God truly does have a plan for my life, then maybe it is priesthood. Maybe priesthood is what I'm really seeking to satisfy the longings of my heart and to satisfy the lack of peace that I continue to have in the midst of the greatest happiness that I've experienced as a human. The church does need good men, needs faithful men, and it needs someone to turn the tide. Not that I'm the one to do that, but good men who are faithful need to respond to the call of God in their life and to live out whatever He has planned for us. And if we do that, then people are going to start talking a different way about the Catholic Church, about Christianity, about men in general in our culture. Nothing is better than fulfilling the role that God has chosen for you. That is what we were created for. That was what we are called to do. And truly, nothing will satisfy us unless we do that.
When I was 10 years old, we were living in Virginia Beach, and that's when my third father, who was in the military, adopted me. We moved to Southern California, which for me was a dream. It was like paradise on earth. And it really got me thinking about, I should start enjoying myself. I should start doing things that feel good. By the age of 13, I lived for pleasure and just having fun. One day, my dad comes home and he says that we're going to move to Japan. I instantly became enraged because they were going to take me out of Southern California. When we got to Japan, I looked for kids who were basically doing the same thing that I was in the Japanese community. And eventually, because of that association, I got connected with this Japanese mafia organization called the Yakuza. I was a little Caucasian boy that they could fill up my backpack with all these drugs and money to run to different casinos, all on the main island of Honshu, the big island of Japan. I was more or less wanted. I had the Japanese government looking for me, the American government looking for me, and the American military presence in Japan looking for me. They literally kicked me out of the country with 2 military police officers handcuffed at my feet and my hands, and I was released into the custody of my father. I went to my first rehabilitation center, and I was there for 3 months. It was a complete failure for me. I relapsed the day I got out. At that time in my life, happiness for me basically meant feeling good, having, women constantly and drugs, the high of those experiences. So I thought that I was happy. But obviously, you come down after those experiences, so I tried not to be sober too much. And it just led to several years of being almost perpetually high. On one occasion, things got so out of control from the drug use that I was doing that I actually woke up strapped to a gurney with medical professionals around me, trying to get me not to pass out. I would look kind of...
Now, where should I go?
Just look towards me, and the camera's right over there. So. And this is EWTN's live continuing coverage of the Knights of Columbus 134th Supreme Convention, right from Toronto, Canada. Doug Keck, and now joining me on the set is Carl Anderson, Supreme Knight of the Knights of Columbus. Thank you so much for finding the time. I know how busy you are and had to fight through the crowds even to get here, but it's important that we get a chance to talk to you and really with your powerful message every year, especially standing up for life. This year you came up with a light to the nations. You talked about it, but maybe for our audience now, you could tell us succinctly, why did you pick that as your focus?
Well, it touched base on several themes for us. First, it resonates really well with Pope Francis's call to missionary discipleship, going to the peripheries. Second, it emphasizes the extraordinary legacy of Canada, the missionaries there that transformed not only Canada, but North America, the United States. And then third, it emphasizes the fact that we all need to be witnesses. We all need to be in our own way a light, right? And we know the darkness is not going to overcome the light, even though it's going to try. Right. And so sometimes we have to do this with words, but more importantly, we have to do it with our actions and just the way we are as Christians.
One of the things that struck me was you started your talk talking about the Canadian martyrs. And in a sense, we ended talking about today's martyrs in your talk, and certainly which we heard from his beatitude, Yonan talking from Syriac, talking about that as well. Was that on purpose that you wanted to start with that connection?
Yes, because we've been, in the United States, we've been so blessed to have a country that respects religious liberty, respects freedom of conscience, but we're unique in the world. As we saw in the Pew Forum report, 108 countries persecute Christians. It's only about 148 countries. Wow. So that's a huge amount. And we have to start, I think, focusing on that, being more in solidarity. You know, when John Paul II was Pope, we had this great solidarity movement, especially with Christians, Catholics behind the Iron Curtain. It's time to apply that globally to so many Christians, and also to understand that, you know, the time for us to stand up and be counted, and it may not be an easy thing for us to do, but that's our heritage.
Right. Now, you yourself personally in the Knights, I remember last year really put into focus the whole idea of dealing with the Christians in the Middle East, but also the idea of appearing at the UN at several times in front of Congress, promoting the idea of the Christian concept of genocide, what's going on. There's a purposeful attack on Christians. Why do you think the world seems so slow to see that?
Well, I think there's a couple of reasons. First, there are a lot of countries in which Christians are second-class citizens, so they don't want to hear about it, number one. Number two, there are more and more countries where this kind of militant secularism is actually attacking Christianity, and therefore they don't want to be bothered by it. We see a lot of, some more of that in the United States developing as well. So we need to stand up, we need to be counted, we need to stand firm. That's why we're giving the award in part this year to Little Sisters of the Poor. Now those are the least threatening people I've ever met, right? But there they are, courageous. They're not going to compromise. They do work every day that most people would flee from to help those in the margins of life. And they're heroic. And so they're a witness, an example for all of us.
Right. And you talk about religious freedom, and you mentioned the United States. Do you think too many people in the United States don't understand how important religious freedom is to the way they live their lives and how they live their lives, and they think that there's this kind of natural understanding of what's right and what's wrong, and don't realize how much of it is based on our faith and our Judeo-Christian background?
I think that's going to be a big wake-up call one day. I think it's very clear we're living off the capital of a Christian society. You can say Judeo-Christian society if you like. But as we move away from that, postmodern, deconstruction, all the fancy philosophical terms, what the reality is, you go outside the Christian tradition, the Judeo-Christian tradition, and where do you find a really strong anchoring of the sanctity of human life, of the dignity of the human person, of the dignity of the human conscience? And so when we look at our First Amendment, how many countries do we see have a First Amendment? Which is really a very practical explication of the sacredness of the human conscience. So you have freedom of religion, freedom of the press, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, but it all comes back to the fact that this unique human being is precious because he or she has the freedom of conscience, which is given to us by the Lord so that we can freely seek and love Him and live our life on a path that moves us, we hope, closer to Him.
Not from the state, but from God.
Not from the state, but from God.
Right.
Yes.
Now, another thing you focused on, following up on our President Holy Father, is building the domestic church. Now, that seems to really dovetail into what everything the Knights of Columbus are doing. Is that how you see it?
Yes, because you see, the church lives within the domestic church, the relationship between the domestic church and the parish church, the sacraments and the family. And so there's going to be a lot of controversies, you know, about marriage and family and the institution of marriage and what constitutes a family. But if we can focus on the sacramental basis of marriage and the family, and we can understand that the family created in the image of the Holy Family and in the Trinity is called to a particular way of life, that's a key for us. And that's what we have to do really as Catholics, looking to the future. How do we protect our children? How do we protect our grandchildren? How do we transmit the faith effectively? Not just by giving them a book, a catechism, but as the Pope says, living together, praying together, acting together, so that as a family in which the faith transforms the family.
And what I think is great and what the Knights can do is, again, people feel supported that way. They see others doing it. They see others of like mind, and that gives them strength and the courage to live out their faith, which doesn't always happen if you feel alone.
Yeah. And that, of course, is the great thing about World Youth Day, with so many people there, pilgrims there, they understand they're not alone. But the place you really understand you're not alone, to begin with, is in your family. And so we've got to really focus a lot more attention on families and on making our parishes more family-friendly and integrating the life of our family into the life of our parish.
Now, in the section when you talked about in your speech about the culture of life, I thought this was very interesting. You said, "My brother Knights, in 1882, widows and orphans were on the margins of society. Today it is the unborn and those at the end of life who are on the periphery. That is why now, as throughout our history, the Knights of Columbus embraces those who are being ignored by society."
Yep. That's it. So, see, we can't be selective. We have a consistent ethic of life. We have a consistent value of life. And that's why, again, going back to Little Sisters of the Poor, you can't do better than they do in helping those on the margins. Right. Yet they teach us that you can't compromise one part of the faith and be wholly faithful in the other parts. So this idea of cafeteria Catholicism that we can pick and choose is wrong. We're called to be faithful. Sometimes it's unpopular. Sometimes we have an issue with, can we really assent to it? But our job is not to say, well, here I disagree. Our job is to say, it's hard for me to understand that. I need to study more so that I can be a faithful son or a faithful daughter of the church.
Now, one of the things you brought out in your talk as well was really speaking specifically about abortion, the evils of abortion, and trying to make sure people understand there's a differentiation between that evil of abortion and some of the other issues that sometimes in a political vein are allowed to sweep in and give one the impression that there's equivalencies. You made that a specific point. You were quoting yourself back from 8 years ago.
Well, I just don't see how you can arrive at any other conclusion. There are a lot of evils. There are a lot of things we have to make better. But the fact of the matter in the United States is we have almost 50 million abortions. That's 50 million lives ended. What possibly compares to that? Now, for example, immigration is a huge issue, and there's a lot of injustice there. But at the end of the day, where 8 million or 10 million people live is not on the same level of whether 50 million people live at all. Doesn't mean it's not important. It just means, and so I think we've been played as Catholic voters balancing this. What I'd like to see us do is say, okay, there's some issues here. Let's start with abortion. And, you know, if you're against life, then you're not going to get our vote. Maybe I can't vote for that person because I don't agree with these other things. But you, if you're going to support a culture of death, we're not going to be involved in it. And that's why I think we could actually have a new kind of politics. It doesn't have to be either party. Right now, because of this balancing thing, parties ignore us. Right? But if we would say, okay, what party could win if the Catholic population suddenly said, we're not doing it.
And unified,
right,
on an issue like that.
Right? It might benefit one party in this election. But if the other party changed, then what would it do? Why don't the parties try to balance their platform against Catholic social doctrine instead of the other way around? That's what I guess I'm really saying, is make them choose. Because right now, they're not paying attention to us.
Well, you're standing up for the truth, and that's what's important. Just before we go, I wanted to thank you. You mentioned our beloved foundress, And it's so nice that you were able to do that, and we appreciate all the support you've given EWTN over the years, and the Knights continue to, and we hopefully have reciprocated that as well.
Doug, thank you.
Always a pleasure.
Great.
Thank you so much, Carl. That's the Carl Anderson, Supreme Knight of the Knights of Columbus, and he gave a wonderful, wonderful talk, and we thank him so much for stopping by, and really, I have to say, standing up for life like very few others do. We're going to pitch now to a clip on the St. John Paul II National Shrine, another work of the Knights of Columbus. Stay with us.
When you point to someone who lived a life for Christ, it all points back to Christ.
Pope John Paul II was very much a man of encounter, and I think that he's someone that we need to constantly look to in order to discover that in a new generation.
I really was impressed by the shrine. It really helped me enter into the magnitude and depth of everything he did.
There's so much about John Paul that I don't know about. And there were all these stories and visits to numerous countries, and I just had no idea how much he accomplished in his papacy and in his life.
The way he reached out to the youth, and his message at that time that really touched me was, do not be afraid. And in my life, I was just engulfed in fear. It really put some fire in me, some motivation, and he was really the main reason for my conversion back into the church.
This Pope showed you how to love people, and he could love people in the hundreds of thousands, and he showed love to individual people.
You can see how truly normal he was from his earliest days. He was athletic, he was a good student, involved in drama and theater.
Why was he like this? Why did he have this joy? Well, for God.
You also get a sense of his spiritual nature and his mystic nature, and get to experience his first-class relic.
In our Catholic faith, the belief of saints is such a concrete thing. These are real people who had real bodies with blood, like John Paul II's. Blood is in the relic, and that's a very real thing. It makes the faith very concrete.
So much of what people were captured by John Paul II was the personal encounter that they had with him, and so you're really able to have that sort of encounter.
A lot of people can say, oh, it's so hard to be a saint. That was for people in the past. Saint JP2, he went through all of those things that would have been very difficult to say yes to Christ, but he still said yes. It's very inspiring.
This is a very deep and profound experience and place to make a pilgrimage to.
The Notre Dame Council was founded in 1910, so we're in our 105th year right now, which is hard to believe. We're the oldest and largest college council. The Knights of Columbus have 4 principles, and the first of which is charity. In fact, that's the reason why we're here for this event today.
This we've been doing for probably the last 6 or 7 years, and it is the annual Corvilla Thanksgiving dinner, and it's hosted by the Knights of Columbus from Notre Dame. Some of our folks have no parents and have no family and would have no place to go and do Thanksgiving, and so it gives them a chance to come out and celebrate and have a Thanksgiving dinner.
Corvilla Homes is an organization that the Knights here at Notre Dame have a very special relationship with. They're one of the largest beneficiaries of the funds that we raise through our steak sandwich sale fundraiser, which is a fun thing that we do on football games. And this year we've raised $92,000. These are the kinds of people that Christ was talking directly about when he called on the community of believers to support those who were in most need of help.
We have a team of about 5 guys go out every single week to interact with their residents. They talk with them, and they really make them feel dignified because they don't get that many outside visitors, but we love it.
That's one of the
things I was most excited about this year with Corvilla. Really creating those sort of personal connections, which is what these guys want. They just want friends at the end of the day, people to spend time with that's not their caregivers that they're with each and every day. Get a new scenery, something they can look forward to.
I don't know if it's the sight of all these young guys or if it's the smell of the delicious turkeys, but everyone gets really excited and it's a lot of fun. And the other neat thing about serving the Corvilla residents is they all love Notre Dame. They live here in the South Bend community. They love Notre Dame football. They probably know Notre Dame history better than I do.
It's tradition, and that's what Notre Dame's built on. And so it's great that the Knights of Columbus can also be built on tradition and continue that mission.
And we are back. This is EWTN's live continuing coverage of the Knights of Columbus's 134th Supreme Convention from Toronto, Canada. I'm Doug Keck. Joining me on set is a great friend of EWTN. It's the Most Reverend William E. Laurie, Archbishop of Baltimore, Supreme Chaplain of the Knights of Columbus. Archbishop, it's always a pleasure to see you.
As always.
I can see a look of World Youth Day in your eyes there. So you just came over from World Youth Day
Just came
then,
back
right?
last night. We had a wonderful experience. I had a lot of pilgrims from Baltimore who came and had a great experience. But from the perspective of the Knights of Columbus, the biggest thing was what we call the Mercy Center, a huge arena. Probably 100,000 kids went through it over several days. The Knights took this sports arena and made it into a beautiful parish with beautiful liturgies, confessions, venerating the relics of the Polish saints, terrific witness talks and catechesis, and a lot of encouragement for vocations to priesthood and religious life and marriage. It was really one, and the kids were right in the spirit. They were in the spirit. So if I'm looking kind of happy now, it's because their joy rubbed off on me.
Well, that's a good thing. One of the things I know you were over there speaking about, and which we heard so much about today, very powerfully from Carl Anderson, also from his Beatitude, the whole idea of religious freedom, religious persecution. Now, that was a topic that was over there. Was there an interest in the young people who were attending there in that topic?
There was. I can tell you about two things. Number one, one evening they put me down to do a theology on tap in a bar in Market Square in Krakow. And I naturally sort of wondered if anyone would show up. The fact is, the bar was sort of overrun with young people. And Catherine Lopez and myself, we gave our little introduction to it, and then we took questions. There was interest. The questions were good. Next day, there was a panel with Archbishop Warda of Erbil in Iraq, myself, and two others, including George Weigel. They gave Archbishop Warda, as he spoke about the genocide and the really terrible things happening to his people, several standing ovations. When I talked about the Little Sisters of the Poor and the HH mandate in the United States, same thing. Sometimes we don't think young people know what's going on. We don't think they're plugged in. They are. I'm sure they're wondering what kind of world it would be without our freedoms.
I'm just wondering, what kind of questions would they ask, especially to Warda, in the sense of what's going on in there? What do they want to know?
Well, you know, sometimes they just want to know what it's like. They want to know about the 300 Iraqi young people who came over. They want to know what happens to the refugees. They want to know how they live from day to day. They're very human questions. Why? Because religious freedom is not an issue of the right or of the left. It's a human issue. That's the level where the kids were connecting.
Right.
That's the level.
Right. Now, one of the things you've been involved with for several years here dealing with religious freedom is the Fortnight for Freedom, which has been going on. So how did that go this year? And you also tied into talking about this wonderful apostolic exhortation to Catholic men by the Most Reverend Thomas J. Olmsted, Bishop of Phoenix, who I recently got to talk to about this. So how did the Fortnight for Freedom go? Is it bearing fruit, you think?
I think it's bearing fruit. This year our theme was Witnesses to Freedom, and we were very blessed because we have a relationship with Stonyhurst College in the UK, and they brought over the first class relics of St. Thomas More and St. John Fisher, and they did a 10-city tour. And every place those relics went, there were very big crowds. I got the sense that people paid attention this year. Maybe it was the Little Sisters going all the way up to the Supreme Court that got people's attention. Maybe it's the redefinition of marriage. Maybe it's the genocide going on in the Middle East. Whatever it is, I think people's attention was very, very focused this year.
Now, did I see it correctly? I think the relics of St. Thomas More are actually going to be in Washington, I think at your museum, right? Starting in September sometime, I believe.
That's true.
So people can look forward to that
yes,
as well.
so there's going to be a sort of an extended exhibit at the St. John Paul II National Shrine on religious freedom, featuring those relics.
Now, you were involved with the dedication, of the chapel there?
I was.
Recently.
Well, there's two chapels. There's the main chapel, and Cardinal Wuerl and Cardinal Dziwisz of Krakow dedicated the main chapel. I came back a little bit later in March of this year and dedicated the little chapel dedicated to the luminous mysteries. It's like a jewel box, but depicting the luminous mysteries of the Rosary, and it has the blood relic of St. John Paul II.
And that's the connection because he introduced those?
Yes.
Is that why you decided to do that?
That's why they did them.
And I want to get back, just before we run out of time, into the breach. You promoted this, you talked about this. Why do you think this is important? I would think also with men and the Knights of Columbus, it's a perfect fit.
The Knights of Columbus is perfectly positioned to help men live their faith. That's why Father McGivney founded it. This pastoral letter, excellent pastoral letter of Archbishop Olmsted, really lays it out, what men's spirituality is all about. And I think that as the Knights of Columbus, it's important for us to embrace this, not just at the level of the Supreme, but in every local council.
Now, going back to World Youth Day and what you were doing over there, are you getting a sense that there's also more young men interested in a vocation to the priesthood or women to the religious life?
Oh, gosh, yes. In fact, I meet so many people there who are priests and sisters at World Youth Day who said to me, I got my vocation in Toronto, I got my vocation in Denver, I got my vocation in World Youth Day in Rome. And you could see it happening there. We had what was called the Vocations Cafe. I think that's what they called it. Anyway, I went in there, and there were serious conversations about religious life and priesthood going on. A lot of the young people who go are put in a place where they're taken out of the distractions of daily life. They're totally focused on their faith, and it might just be that experience that enables them to hear the call of God, and with the solidarity of the other young people around them, they might have the courage to say yes.
I was going to ask you that too, because the idea of what would be the unique experience, what would be there, you would think here's this crowd, this heart, love, distraction, but that's not the way it is.
It's good peer pressure. In other words, what I love and why I want my young people to go from Baltimore is because they go over there and they see from all around the world 1.6 million young people who want to follow the way. There are different places in the spectrum. Some are right there. Some just came to find out what this was about. but there is a wonderful thing. Talk about a critical mass. This is it.
Right. Have you experienced yourself seeing people who your impression was maybe came there thinking, well, this is a good thing, we'll go there and it's we all get together and I get to travel to Poland, sure. and we're impacted in a way they'd never expected?
Young people told me that. They came up to me because I was sort of like the maitre d' around in the thing. I was just walking around talking to people. I didn't do the hard work of setting it up, but I walked around and I had young people come up and say that, you know, Bishop, I just came along for the ride and something happened I never expected here. One young lady with tears in her eyes. So yeah, this is all we're doing is putting young people in the way of God's grace, right. And the Lord does the rest.
Right, and we hope in some ways EWTN does that too by projecting that out into the populace.
You bring World Youth Day out to all those who can't go, and we thank you for that.
Well, thank you so much, Archbishop. You've always been a wonderful friend to EWTN. I know Michael Warsaw is a good friend of yours as well. Is. Archbishop William Lori is the chaplain of the Knights of Columbus, and I also wanted to mention that Into the Breach, this wonderful book that we were talking about by Most Reverend Thomas J. Olmsted of Phoenix, is available through the EWTN Religious Catalog, EWTNRC.com. Don't forget, we'll be back at 6:30 p.m. Eastern here in Toronto with our continuing live coverage of the States Dinner. Always exciting, always colorful, and a favorite part of the convention for many watching.